Vicki, would you please do the, all right. You can do the roll, please.
John Heidi.
Here.
Dan Collins.
Here.
Scott Zimmerman.
Here.
Dathan Paterno.
We'll be late.
Dr. Borelli.
Here.
Vicki Lee is here. Bob Johnson.
Here.
Great. Today is April 27th, 2015, at our regular scheduled meeting of the District 64 Board of Education. We're holding it tonight at Carpenter Elementary School, and we have quite a bit of items on the agenda tonight, and I will give the remarks once we convene back in open session. However, there are a few items that we will discuss in closed. One of the items has been removed from closed session, and we'll move it to open session. That is discussion on the TIF. So there are still two items that need to be discussed in closed session, and I'll make the motion based on 5 Illinois Compiled Statutes 122C1, which is employment to compensation of a specific employee, and 5 Illinois Compiled Statute 122C11, well, that's the pending litigation that's been moved. So all we have is the one exemption tonight, the 5 Illinois Compiled Statutes 122C1. Is there a second?
Second.
We'll need a roll call. So Bob?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, we'll go into close. And John?
Aye.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is Monday, April 27th, 2015. Oh, Becky. Yeah, all set?
No.
Okay. Monday, April 27th, 2015, the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Education District 64. The board has already been in closed session for, I guess, an hour and a half discussing various items. And we are now ready to get into our public version of it. And we know that Brett has some things lined up. I'd like to just get some comments out, and then we'll get rolling into your group there. Tonight's meeting is action-packed. We have 7 separate action items on our agenda. Just so everybody realizes, this is also the next to last meeting to be held by this board, as our next meeting will be a short meeting to tie up and finalize some loose ends. New board members will then be seated after the oath given, and once seated, the board structure is voted on and the practice of the board is discussed. The next full meeting, therefore, will be held on 5/11, the 11th of May. That will be a COW on finance, a committee of the whole on finance. That will be held at Jefferson. And the next full meeting there will be on 5/18. That will be held at Emerson. And tentative topics for that evening will be ELF grant awards, recognition of tenured teachers, architect updates, and approved final calendar for 14-15. There's one update for the board. On Monday, April 20th, Scott Zimmerman and myself, along with Dr. Heinz and Becky Allard, met with Mark Stefanik and Carol Zydak in a very preliminary discussion on the coming contract negotiations. It was nice to sit down with them, and we had a very congenial discussion, and I look forward to more discussions in the future as we wrap this up, hopefully in an expeditious fashion. The next item on our item is the Pledge of Allegiance and welcome. Mr. Brett Baldoff, the principal of Carpenter School, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance in a short program by members of the school.
Yes. Well, thank you. Actually, we have some Carpenter Girl Scouts that are going to help us. Come on up, girls. Who are going to help lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. Some Carpenter Girl Scouts joined with a Carpenter alum. So if you could all please rise for our Pledge of Allegiance. We didn't want to take a picture during the actual pledge, so thank you for allowing us to do a photo op. I'd like like to, okay, I'll project. Don't. Hello. I'd like to welcome the Board of Education, Dr. Hines, our district and building administration, District 64 staff, parents, community members to Carpenter. I'm Brett Baldoff. I'm the school principal here at Carpenter. It's exciting to have a board meeting here once a year, although it does create a little bit of positive stress, I'll be honest with you, because there are so many wonderful things that happen here in our school building throughout the year that I would love to stand up here and share with you all. But I do know and understand that sometimes your meetings can be a little lengthy. So with that said, I thought that our D64 schools are about our children. So instead of me talking about Carpenter School, we would allow our students to do that. So from a wonderful idea of our PTO president, Angela Margaret, we asked our students if they could share what it's like to be a D64 Carpenter student. And hopefully maybe at a break time or after the board meeting tonight, you could spend some time walking around our gym and taking a look. You'll see some things that are up there from our kindergarten class and from our third grade classrooms and other students that wrote and did some artwork and poems about what it's like to be a D64 student. But again, there's so much to talk about. But since our district made a big decision to move to a one-to-one initiative, we felt it was only fitting to highlight some of that initiative. And we had asked several of our students a couple questions about technology. So we thought we'd share this short 6-minute presentation with you tonight. Please ignore the terrible irony that it's screen-free week and that we're using a screen tonight to do this. But as you make decisions and you volunteer your time as board members here in District 64, hopefully this will remind you why it is that you do what you do. And also realize that the students did not realize we were going to be doing this. It's unscripted. We did leave in some of their thoughts and some of their grammar mistakes because we wanted you to realize that this was impromptu and this was really our Carpenter students sharing what they wanted to share.
It's hard to explain. It's something you do on a screen. It's something that we make so that we can do stuff faster. Analogy is where it's like data and you need to collect it from computers. Learning technology is like improve like computers, iPad, robots. Technology is electronic stuff. Things that lights, like smartphones and laptops. It is like it's kind of like screens and new like ways to do stuff. Technology is like a computer that Albert Einstein made. At school, we use it to learn. We on the Chromebooks, we go on KidBlog and we use Google Docs to write. We use tablets in our classroom. iPads. This big thing you can go on apps and computers. You can like keyboards. You can go to different things with the mouse. Like we're doing right now, you can research stuff and find out answers and look stuff up. For your brain so you can remember. Or we use it by doing school-wide stuff, like for learning, and we use it to like sometimes it can be fun, sometimes it can be a little hard. Using your Google Drive is it's very easy. You play as kids, you read books, and you learn how to You use it for education stuff. New York Times and social studies with that groups, and I really like that. Okay, then that's right. These are the books to get stars and use the stars to really get it for once. One of my favorite things would probably be Genius Hour. Genius Hour is where we pick a topic we're interested about and we research about it and we make a whole presentation about it, like on poster board or on a Grokster website where you make a digital poster. Yeah, I like to be in Khan Academy. It's a math program on the Chromebook. Stop motion is where you take pictures and you have to move objects just a little bit, because then when you put it all together, it looks like they're actually like moving really fast. Computers, probably doing ocean research report. I like when we make the iBooks and when we made the immigration videos. Smartboard, we did this game maze of the map at that smartboard. And we have to try to what's the word and we have to try to guess the word. Like we're doing about these rainforest animals, and so we research projects on them and like create like sort of paragraphs about them, and then we put them into like action, like with these kind of presentations. We use technology for map testing, HUD testing. Can we do accents?
Not anymore, no.
Okay. We could do it for like star testing. We do it for like something completed and like all that cool stuff. How does your teachers use technology? Let students help sometimes. I like. Have you ever played a Go Noodle? Go Noodle is something that kids like to like shake out, focus more, and like maybe like take a break. Do it for education stuff, not for just playing video games and stuff.
No, they know good about it, and they know a lot about it, and they have the tech advisors, and I want to teach them.
Thank you, school board.
So on behalf of Carpenter School and District 64, thank you for the decision that you made about a year ago to bring the One-on-One initiative to life here in our district. As you can see, our students are really engaged in it and learning so much and enjoying it so much, so we appreciate it, and we appreciate all that you guys do. And we hope that said a little bit about Carpenter School tonight. And I also wanted to publicly thank Amanda Pelser, who is our instructional tech coach, who really helped this project come to life by doing all the editing and videoing and interviewing of our students. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Brett. That was
Thank
great.
you, Brett. We always start off every open meeting as per state law with inviting folks in the public forum to come forward, and if anybody has anything that they would like to talk about that's not on the agenda, please come forward to the podium. And not seeing anybody, there's two things I'm going to add as a point of information to the current agenda. First is Scott. Originally, I know I might be putting you on the spot with this, but originally we were planning to do a tour of the boilers, and our closed session consumed all of that time as I anticipated. If you could give us the executive summary of where we are with the facilities here in Carpenter.
Sure, absolutely. As far as the HVA system goes, we're set, we're up and running. I think you can feel pretty comfortable here today. Our problems are really just down to normal kind of problems, nothing out of the ordinary that would be design related or anything, a leak here, a leak there, but I mean, it's just part of the transition. So everything is really running quite smoothly. And if you want to look at the borders, I'll drill a hole in the floor and you can just peek down through. They're right below you here. So everything is going fine. Everything is going fine.
Great.
Thank you for your concern.
And this coming winter, we should be spot on then.
We will be spot on for this air conditioning season. It's going to start probably tomorrow and for winter next year, yes.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
The other item that I'd like to talk about is, if Becky is here, you were going to provide us with an update on the TIF?
Sure, Madam Officer. We continue to meet and have discussions with the city. We're waiting for a draft proposal of the contract, the amended contract between the district and the city of Park Ridge. And once we receive that, we will bring it back to the board for discussion.
When do you anticipate that to occur, Becky?
I ask Eris at least twice a day. So,
We're waiting on the village attorney, correct? Get it all together.
All righty. Thank you. First item is a non-action item, and that's a presentation by the Maine Township School Treasurer. Mr. Albeck, welcome.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, I'm Tom Albeck, and I'm the Maine Township School Treasurer. I'm a graduate of Northern Illinois University, a CPA, and I've been the treasurer since 1990. Can you hear me? Okay, can we start over? Or is
No.
Okay, all right. I'm the treasurer of School District 34, which in Glenview, 62 in Des Plaines, 63, which is East Maine, 64, of course, is Park Ridge, and High School District 207 and Penoyer School District 79. As treasurer, I have custodial of all school funds, and which is actually the trustees have custodial of all school funds and school assets, and I am appointed the treasurer, and it's a custodial relationship as opposed to an administration relationship. And then I have three primary responsibilities, which I'm going to review with you. One is to keep the assets, safeguard against different things we'll talk about, and manage the cash flow of the schools, and also to get a return on the investments of the schools. So let's talk about those three areas. The first area is the safeguarding the funds, and this area really involves protecting against fraud, and fraud can take many different shapes, and we read about it in the newspaper, and and we work with it to protect against it. But fraud we want to protect against is internal fraud, something happening in our office; external fraud, something happening, related to the schools, and or it can be people we don't even know that can cause fraud to our our money, our funds. Or, more recently, the cybercrime has become a big issue, and we, feel that we're strong in all our areas, but we're not going to rest. We're going to continue to tighten up and improve, and we attend seminars and also work with the banks and, making sure that our funds are secure. Overall, the treasurer provides a control function, and that separates the duties of the safekeeping of the money from the accounting for the money. And it's a time-tested system. So that's how we, safeguard funds. Managing the cash flow, we really want to maximize the investable funds, get as much money yielding a higher rate, and still meet the cash flow requirements of the school districts for their payroll and vendor checks. The payments, I guess checks is sort of a dated expression. A lot more is electronic all the time. But also, while that money is not being used, we negotiate rates with the with the banks rather for the school district, and then we monitor those rate returns to make sure that the banks, from time to time where hundreds of thousands of dollars is involved, where the computer notches down the rate or they don't follow through on their negotiated rate, and and I won't say it's regular. People make mistakes, but it's our job to watch that. So that's part of what we do. We also monitor all the banks, which is an important function. And this sometimes seems like a rote exercise because we do it every quarter. We provide lists. We have rating services. And, years ago, I remember bank went under in Oak Brook called Superior Bank, and we weren't in that bank. And we said, if our rating system, that we're using, would we know that this bank was in trouble? And we went back and hey, 2 years before that bank went down, we would have known it. And our numbers would have shown that this was a problem bank. And back in 2008, our system did get tested too, and we were with banks that were considered stellar, National City and also First Bank, and very good banks. And all of a sudden we saw the numbers in March or so, and after year end, and they run about 2-3 months behind. And we said, these numbers are unbelievable. For example, we watch return on assets, return on equity. We watch loan losses. Well, we would like banks to have 1 or 2% of their loans go bad, and we always said, well, if they go 5%, these banks are really in trouble. Well, they were hitting 8-9%, and so we just knew that, we didn't have information, but we had numbers, and so we went to the schools, and we said we want to get out of these banks, and and we got out of the banks over the spring and the summer. And then the crisis really blew up in the fall, so we were way ahead of it by monitoring our banks. So that talks about sort of our managing the cash flow, safeguarding investments. Let's talk about the investing the school funds. We've invested in fixed income, and we have separate the funds into operating and investing funds, the operating more to meet the cash flow requirements. And in the fixed income, it's important to understand that that's a lot different than the stock market. A lot of people mix them up. A lot of people want to do the same type of analysis, and it's very different. The stock market is more based on something new, I always say, if I had to put it in one word. And you think of Apple computer, they come out with a product, an iPod, then they do an iPhone, then they do an iPad, now they're doing an iWatch. And as those things, if they're successful, the investors are rewarded. At the same time, if they're not successful, the investors don't do as well. Fixed income is different. Fixed income is a risk-return analysis. If you take Fed funds, invest the money overnight, that's what you receive. That's no risk and a very low return. If you want to drive return, you have to expose your money to risk. And so what's important when you have fixed income management is what risk are you being exposed to, and we're going to talk about that. We also watch the current economic conditions. A lot of, back in August 2013, when I was in front of the school board here, I went back in my notes and we were talking about we'll get higher rates when we have higher inflation. And ironically, a newsletter I filed just had a title this morning, Where's the Hyperinflation? Because everybody thought we were going to get higher rates and higher inflation. And so, which sort of brings another point up is the limitations of forecasts. We don't work a lot with forecasts. That doesn't mean we don't want to be in touch with the market. We want the pulse of the market. But, forecasts are interesting, but a lot of times when people try to make a forecast, they're trying to forecast future events, which are uncertain. And they're really working with endless scenarios and not something that can really be quantified. So what we want to do is quantify what we do. And there's two major concepts that we're going to talk about briefly. One is mark-to-market, and that's an interesting concept in that mark-to-market involves reflecting in the return of your investments, the change in market price. And there's a lot of logic to it, even though, like any measurement system, it can be flawed, misrepresentative of what you're doing, and has limitations. What people don't like about it, or what it leads to, is a lot of investors investing way too short a time because they never want to be wrong. What if rates go up? You'll price it in my securities. My securities will be underwater, as they say. And how do I explain that? But the only way to protect that is to be very liquid, overly liquid. And actually in mark-to-market, a lot of times there's yield confusion too, because people will say, well, you're down 5%, you're up 10%, you're down 6%, because they're reflecting that market price, and it's not as easy to follow. And actually there were some problems even in the financial crisis of mark-to-market, where banks were having to mark their portfolios to market, and then it became a cascading effect as things were collapsing, where there was still security or value out there, but if it's mark to market, it can be, is it really representative? Measurement systems have faults, but Mark-to-market's an important concept. We have to respect it. We have to know what our portfolio is worth at all time, and that type of thing. But, a good example where mark-to-market can be a faulty, if used exclusively, are some of these investment pools. And I don't know if you read some of the articles lately about the Illinois Metropolitan Investment Fund, but they lost $50 million. And a lot of it had to do with taking too much credit risk. And they were known in the industry, or, and I found this out sort of in hindsight because we aren't involved in them, but we don't invest in that type of thing. But they were pushing a yield that was higher than really the market. But the only way they can do that and maintain the liquidity is to take credit risk. And that you'll see that in a minute as I talk about more what we do is that to drive our yield is a little different. And what we do is really more of a buy and hold strategy. And also with that we match up our style because the schools don't, we know our cash flow, we line up our maturities with how our money goes out, and we can avoid credit risk that way. Now, we do take maturity risk. We invest our longer term money up to 5 years, which has worked out very well for the schools, especially as we've had a market that has continually given us lower and lower rates. The risk is always, what if rates rise? Now, how we control that is really by monitoring our assets and our investments using an average life. So if you buy a 5-year investment, but you ladder them over 5 years, you have liquidity by investments coming off all the time, and also you're working with a 2.5-year average life as opposed to a 5-year investment. And that avoids a lot of credit risk, drives a higher return, and it works a lot with what we call bond mathematics, which is really a science as opposed to an art, working more with math. And, what does that mean? Well, our investments move down the yield curve. What was originally bought as a 5-year becomes a 4-year, 3-year, 2-year, 1 year, and you're getting a 5-year return on a 1-year investment. We watch the moving average lines. If you look at a yield graph, they're very jagged, and what we try to do is use averages to smooth that out, and then we can see when the peaks and valleys are above or below the moving averages and consider those better or worse times to buy. We're very aware of the opportunity cost of waiting. A lot of times to wait, the example always is if you took whatever return, 1%, yields are so low, I have to almost go to negative numbers. But if we take 0 return today for a year, then we have to, instead of 1% today, then a year from now we have to get 2% type thing. We call that the opportunity cost of waiting, and it's all mathematics. We work with the spread. If the yield of a 5-year is the same as a 4-year, we maybe consider those two equal. And we also work with an upward sloping yield curve many times, which is a normal curve. Not that it's always that way. It can be flat and inverted, and we've worked with that too. But in a normal curve, you get rewarded for going longer term. So those are, all things mathematical things that we work with and incorporate into our strategy. It's still many times challenging because you have to balance these two strategies, and that we always have to respect. We can't just go blindly long term because we always have to respect that market interest rates could go up, and the longer they stay down, the more violently they could go up. Sometimes I've heard the analogy, though, and which I think is good, is when you fear higher rates, and we've had rates sort of jerk up type thing quickly. It's an analogy that you have to have sometimes too. It's like a boat that is tied to a pier. It might drift off, but then they drift back too. So it's not like they will rocket up to 18% type thing either. And we don't know. And I mean, even if that scenario happened, 18% in a day, which I think we don't have to invest for that type of craziness. But if that were to happen, we do have a ladder that rolls off, and we would have maturities. We work in real time, which is always a challenge. There's a lot of noise in the market, but as an economist said last summer, you want to make hay when the sun's shining. I attended a seminar last summer, and this economist said, make hay when the sun is shining. So, that's a little bit what we're trying to do. Just take advantage of different market opportunities. If the yield's above the moving average, if we can go longer term and manage it in our cash flow, those are the opportunities we want to take advantage of. So I want to thank you for allowing me to manage the school funds and giving me the opportunity to explain the duties and functions of the treasurer's office.
Thank you, Tom. Does the board have any questions for Tom?
Yeah, actually, I've got a few questions. First, I want to say thanks, Tom, for what you do for the district and for safeguarding our funds and investing in, nice, safe government agencies, the Fannie Mae's and Freddie Mac's and things of that nature. But certainly, as you know, there was a lot of turmoil during the financial crisis, and obviously, the funds that you're investing are, our greatest liquid assets that we have, really. So I wanted to thank you for that. I had a question just concerning sort of just how the custody of the assets work when you're purchasing these investments. Are they centralized with one custodian, or or are they custodied with sort of the firms that you're trading with?
No, all our investments are safe kept at Wells Fargo.
Okay.
And in their safekeeping department, and if they're bought with, we work with different brokers, and the brokers work with what's called delivery versus payment, where Wells Fargo releases our money when they deliver the security.
Okay. And so I guess you're making the decisions on the securities to buy and stuff. I know you're here. Just could you give us a little background on your office? Like, are there other people who would back you up, or sort of what the structure of that is?
Yeah, the primary person that backs me up is Debbie Ittner, who's here tonight. She's a graduate of University of Illinois, has a degree in finance, has been in our office for over 20 years, and has been a big advantage to the schools and my office, and very competent person and handles her job very well. And then I would say technology, we use a Bloomberg terminal, which is very important because it really gives us the same tools as any large bond company or bank, and we handle a lot of money, so it's well worth the investment. And then we also have excellent financial reporting from where we give them from a bond pricing service. So we send them our portfolio, and then they come back and generate the reports, and they can also analyze our report and stress test if rates go up 300 basis points, down 300 basis points. So I would say, both people and a lot of use of technology.
And do you have, I know you have guidelines for the firms, the brokers you can deal with, and definitely over the types of instruments you can buy. Is any of that, in any sort of, system or something that when you're trading, it checks that, you're staying within the guidelines and dealing with parties, and is there sort of more than one person who checks off on that activity?
Well, I don't think we ever violate that. I mean, we know that we have our guidelines, and we just know what they are. I mean, we don't buy anything. I mean, if we were to do anytime we're approached by anything unusual, we would investigate it. I mean, and I think a lot of what we basically do, government agencies, Fannie Mae and Federal Home Loan and that type, and then the maximum maturity is 6 years, and so we don't. I mean, if we do calls, we don't like much more than a one-time call because of the uncertainty, and so I don't think that. I don't know that I feel there's a risk there. I don't know that we ever bought things. I mean, when brokers have approached us with, I've been approached with countless things, and by different brokers from around the state, but we're very around the country. And we really, as a rule, we don't deal with anybody outside Chicagoland, because it's like if we can't get in Chicagoland, we get everything we want in Chicago. We don't buy anything that has any leverage involved, or we don't buy step-up CDs. We buy a lot of things that are. Even when we like bonds that are what they call bullet bonds, in that they have a set maturity. We don't like calls, because a call is in the favor of the agency. And sometimes, if they pay us enough premium, we'll take a one-time call, but we don't. I rarely, if ever, do we take continuous call. So we do have strict guidelines, and we follow those. And everybody, we don't buy anything that doesn't meet the guidelines. I don't know that we've ever held anything that doesn't meet the guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Tom, I have one quick question for you. I'm interested in deficit spending. Tribune article about a month and a half ago intimated that many school districts in Illinois are starting to get on the cusp of deficit spending. What's your feelings of the districts, the various districts that you're aware of and participate with? Are they already starting to fall into that deficit spending pattern? And if so, are your reserves starting to decrease, and will that affect the rate of return that we get on as small as it is? Will it go down even more so as the capital funds decrease?
If the district has less capital funds, the rate of return will be less. But we have enough liquidity that we know our cash flow pretty well, that we can invest. And I would say historically the reserves, do increase and decrease, but not that quickly, that we don't adjust.
Do you find District 64 in a solid financial position as far as deficit spending and maintenance of our savings compared to other districts?
We just, I don't know if we really analyze the districts themselves. We really just invest the money to get the most return and still meet the cash flow requirements. So, if the district was to spend more money or even have an emergency, we've even done those scenarios that, if all of a sudden a school had a fire, a tornado, something horrific, and they had to, liquidate our funds, could we do it? And that's one reason, I've talked a little bit tonight about mark-to-market and its limitations and how people stay too liquid with it. They're staying in the money market because it's like, what if rates go up? And, I'm sitting here with these investments, and we've maybe sacrificed a little of that, even though we've tested for that scenario, and we've even survived that scenario. Rates have gone up in periods of time, too. So it's not like we never had scenarios where rates have gone up, but they've come back down further then afterwards. But we watch the value of our portfolio in total, so that if we had to liquidate significant portions of it, that we could.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, thank you, Tom. I
Sure.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is a presentation update by our architects. Hi there.
Be here again. There we go. Again, I'm Kerry Leonard with FGM Architects, and this is Terry Wright, Terry's part of the team that's been working on the project. We want to take an opportunity this evening to really go through this next update to you on the Health Life Safety Survey Master Facility Planning work that's been done. But before we do that, I just want to digress a little bit, say something that happened at FGM recently. We have a chili cook-off at FGM every year, and we invite our clients to come in and be judges. And then the judges throw their hat, their card in the hat, and we see if we draw and try to do something for our clients. So Dr. Hines was kind enough to be a judge, and was lucky enough to win a $500 check that FGM has presented to the district for your foundation. So we're happy to have made that contribution. I hope the chili was good.
It was delicious. It's a nice perk.
So anyway, thank you for participating, but we're really pleased that we could make that kind of donation. It's the kind of things we like to do with our clients. So, yeah. So last time we talked, and was really more of an introduction into the facility side, Tonight, we want to delve into the educational side and some of the capacity enrollment study portions that we'll be doing as part of this work. And again, this is introductory, but please stop me if you have any questions, ask them as we go. We'll try to go through this as efficiently as possible here tonight. So last time we talked about the various plan components of the master facility plan, the health, life, safety survey, the building assessment, and as I said tonight, we're talking about the educational planning piece of that. And we talked about 3 different cost areas last time: operations cost, the maintenance and repair costs, and the capital improvements. So the kind of projects that we're talking about tonight that will come out of this work are in that capital improvements portion. And within the capital improvements, we looked at projects that extend the useful life of the building, and that, again, is more to the facility side that we talked about last time. And the bottom 2 are really where, again, the focus will be for these types of discussions tonight. They accommodate the changes in the building or the program capacity, or to make modifications to enhance or expand the program. So this tries to tie it back into that previous presentation a little bit and the overall structure of the plan. So I want to talk about what we call drivers. What drives these changes in the school buildings? And enrollment changes is clearly the number 1 issue. And that means enrollment can go up or enrollment can go down. And it also means changes in subpopulations. If you were to have a large increase in EEL learners and all of a sudden you had to have programs, there's a direct impact of that. Groups may move in, with special ed populations, how they might change within a district. So we have subpopulations, we have the overall population. So this is really the number 1 driver for most change in school buildings. We're not, seeing great growth around the country in schools. Some areas have some significant growth, some have significant decline. Obviously, a community like yours, you look around, you see the additions and the rebuilds that are going on, and it's a desirable community to live in, so you have a good population base. The second is program changes, and programs can be added, programs can be eliminated, technology change can happen. You can decide to enhance an existing program, and you want to try to build in some flexibility for program changes that happen over time. So are there things that we can start to anticipate that might happen? And it's not doing something because it might happen in the future. It's if we do some work, how might we better plan for future flexibility? And I think this is a very important idea that we're going to we've been looking really hard at in the facility planning. How does everything we do today get tested 3 or 4 different ways that it might be in the future, run some scenarios so that we're building in flexibility in everything we do. I also included this little graph here. This actually came from a survey that was just done at one of your schools, and it's how often do you use the computer lab in the library. So this is this year after you've had the 1-to-1, and what you'll see here is rarely 11 out of the 16 teachers responded that they are not using the computer lab in the library to the extent that they used to use it. So you have had an introduction of 1-to-1 technology, and that's caused a decrease in that space being used in the library. But what that means is we need to look at, what are the other ideas as to how that space could be best used to support education. And each of the schools is really talking about how do you make that 21st century library. It was something we were looking at anyway. But when you see these little data points, it helps you to see a more direct correlation between what you're doing on the 1-to-1 initiative and a relationship between space. So I thought that was an interesting piece of data and wanted to share that. We are doing a facility analysis. We're looking at the capacity of the buildings and based on the programs. You did some of that work previously, and we're looking at that and trying to tie into that work that was done. We're also looking at utilization of space, and we're looking at the educational planning, and we're looking before and after school use of the building. So it's not just how the building gets used during the normal school day, but you have an awful lot of programs before and after, and so we want to take those into account as well. So during the facility analysis process, we have these regular design team meetings. We've been coming to the administrative team meetings on Monday morning, so we've had these ongoing discussions about the facilities and how they're working. Last week we had lunches. Terry and I went to lunch at every one of the district's buildings last week, and we met with the staff, and it was the staff's opportunity to give us some feedback. So we had some, good attendance and some good ideas. We took the notes. We're trying to incorporate that input into the work that we're doing. We've been looking at the drawings. We've been going out to the buildings and the site review. So we're not just confining it to the walls. It's also out onto the site, the playground areas, the approaches, the drop-off, and parking. So we're looking at all of those areas. So what's going to look like in the master facility plan? I want to talk about kind of where do we go? If we say there's a project, what is that project? What does it look like? So we are doing concept development level work. We're identifying goals and objectives. We're looking at the need. We're taking a square foot area that might be encompassed in addressing that need and coming up with a written description of what that work is. We're also looking at what those expected results from doing that work might be, what the anticipated budget or range of budget might be. We're not doing design solutions. This is really to present to you a list of possibilities and the rationale behind those possibilities and how they fit together so that it becomes a planning tool for you. So this gives you an idea here. You can see all we're doing in some of these areas like the LRC. We know that the LRC here, we want to have a collaborative space, we want to have technology resources, and we want to have flexible project spaces. We'll elaborate further on that. We may show pictures of some examples in other districts. We may have a little bit more detail about the type of work that be done. But from this type of discussion, we can say, okay, we're going to have to do something with the shelving or the furniture. We may have to bring some more power to areas. We may want to break it up into separate, smaller group spaces so multiple activities can happen. And from that, we can look at a scope of work, and we'll sit down with Nicholas, and we'll develop a cost per square foot multiplied by the area, and that'll give us the budget for doing something in the LRC. The auditorium, we know we have some accessibility issues that we have to deal with in there. We've also had extensive discussions about how do we make those spaces more flexible and to be used by students to support education on a regular basis in the school. So we're brainstorming on some of those ideas, and again, we'll come up with a narrative. We've talked in the past about the security. There's the main office, the vestibule. This is an area that we know we're going to have to do some work to create a hardened vestibule and to have the supervision of that vestibule as you come in the front door. Some buildings it's easier to do than others, but from that we're able to put a square foot cost, working with Nicholas on what that'll be, and we'll have a little bit more detailed description, a highlighted plan area, and a cost associated with it. So that's kind of what these projects will look like from the educational projects. These are really concepts. And what we do with that then is once everything is put together in the plan, you've accepted the plan, and the decision is made as to how to align your resources that are available and prioritize the work, and you give direction to move ahead with a particular project, that's when we can actually start to do multiple options that will work closely with the school and bring back to you to see, and then ultimately end up with partee or a final option that's then the decision is made to go ahead. So I do want to, set a realistic expectation that, we're not designing a solution to the LRC. We know what a solution to the LRC will contain, and from that we'll be able to put a cost to it. But that's what the master plan document is going to look like for each building. Are there any questions on that? Okay, enrollment. And I know you talked about this at your last meeting a little bit, probably more than a little bit. So we have looked at the demographic material, the CASARDA report, the new residential development material. We've looked at that, and I know you had a presentation on that last time. And we've been looking at the monthly enrollment information from the district. So based on that review, we are looking district-wide overall at using the CASARDA B projection as the enrollment. And that's district-wide. It's not building by building. We know there's some issues that need to be looked at building by building. We've got to delve in a little bit further on that and start to look at how variations might affect capacities and enrollment in each individual building. But overall, this data from CASARDA, which runs out for the whole district, is the overall guideline that we're using for overall district enrollment. And again, knowing that we have to go back, dig in a little bit deeper into each building and understand if things vary up or down a little bit at a building, how do we accommodate that in the designs that we're going to be bringing forward. So that's where we're at on the enrollment side. Work's still left to be done, but the overall projections for the district under B seem to be holding up pretty well. So we're also looking at, within the buildings then, capacity and utilization. And so if we start to look at capacity models, and I know you've been through some of this before with some of the previous work that was done, we want to look at all of the factors that affect capacity. And from grade level served to the programs to how buildings are scheduled to policies. When you establish a class size, that is a policy which affects capacity. These are all variables in determining the capacity. And really, capacity is best expressed as a range. A building could accommodate 450 kids one year and 500 kids the next year if you just change a few of the variables. So we want to help kind of demystify that and not get locked into one number, but look at that range and look at what the impact in causing that range. And so we're trying to build in that maximum flexibility and understanding for you of the buildings. There's other components that could affect capacity. The cafeteria, how many lunches can you serve? How many kids can get in? How many lunch periods? So that may actually be a limiting factor. A number of lockers is another limiting factor, usually easier to correct because you can always usually find a place to add a few lockers. But if you don't have enough lockers when school opens up, you've got issues you've got to deal with. So we want to look at that. And there's other building-wide resources, depending upon the number of minutes a week that you want to offer art or music to your students. At a certain size building, you need more than one art room or more than one music room. So you need to take those into consideration, and that's how that program impacts capacity. At elementary schools, it gets pretty simple. You have all the classroom-size spaces. You subtract out those classroom-size spaces that are dedicated for some other use. The remaining number of classrooms times the grade level class size, that gives you the capacity of the building. So it's a pretty simple calculation on the elementary schools. On the middle schools, it gets a little bit more complicated, and many middle schools capacity is built on just like the elementary school. The kids are on a team. The team has their own rooms. They own those rooms, and the kids are out of that room for a little bit longer period of time because they have more exploratory courses to go to. And so you have a little bit less efficiency, and middle schools tend to get a little bit bigger because of that. That's a more traditional middle school model. Then there's other schools that are scheduled based on a high school model, where you're looking at anytime there's a vacant room, it's available for students to move into, and that's why you get a little higher utilization using a high school model. Here at Emerson and Lincoln, I'm going to say you have a hybrid model, and I hope you realize how hard your middle school principals have to work to schedule your buildings. I mean, you really are running kind of a dual curriculum with the exploratory curriculum and the core curriculum. And to schedule that and to dovetail those two curriculum with the idea of trying to keep teams together and have teams in the same rooms and trying to use the space that's made available. So, if you had gone to a elementary model in scheduling your middle schools, your buildings would have to be significantly bigger. So you are getting a very high efficiency use of those buildings, much higher than a traditional middle school might be scheduled, but it's because of the curriculum that you run. And it is hard work. Middle school scheduling gets very difficult. Middle school scheduling with a hybrid model you have is very difficult. So you should thank them for doing all that work. So utilization is how the rooms are used throughout the day. And are the rooms appropriately sized? If there's a class of 10, is the room too big for 10 kids? We want to try to look at not only is it used, but how many kids is it used for, how many students at a time, and for what activities. Special education, self-contained special education rooms need a little bit more space. Younger students need a little bit more space, manipulatives and other things that need to be stored. So it's a combination of activities. It's not just a square foot per student calculation. You need to look at some of the nuances. We also want to look at rooms, and some rooms may have square footage, but not so much the case in your district, but some districts you'll get funny shaped rooms. Or the kids are sitting next to the radiators, and the radiators are overheating, so kind of effective use of the room is less. So we want to look at some of those factors as well. So this gives you a drawing of one of your schools, and what we've done is we've done drawings for all the schools where you see how each room is being used. And this is these are classrooms, and we have color coding that identify different areas. One of the things we started to look at was if we just took all the kindergarten classrooms and the special ed, so we can turn on and off layers, and you start to pin up all the buildings, and you start to look at that, and that helps us identify how do classroom clusters work together. What happens if a bubble moves through the classroom? So from the planning point of view, it's looking at this building through a series of lenses, through a variety of resources, and these are just some of the tools that we use to do that. The classification of space is core education, specialized education, educational support, large group spaces, and the facility support spaces. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of these, but this kind of classification allows us to look at the buildings consistently across the district, but also allows us to compare them to the database of other buildings that we've worked on, because we've kept that information. I've kept it for about 10 years worth of information, so we try to take a look at that and just kind of see where you fit in that range. From an educational planning point of view, we want to look at the arrangement of the spaces. You know, if we have a small group space the student have to use, is it near their classroom area, or do they have to, you know, go far down the hall to reach that? Some younger kids especially get lost in the hallway. We try to avoid that happening. Do you have the right size and variety of spaces? You know, how are the buildings zoned for community use, for nighttime use? Can you shut down a portion of the building if you just have a public event in one of your auditoriums or in one of your gyms? We want to look at future expandability. We're not talking about additions, but what we want to do is we want to look at how could each building be expanded, because if you needed to add something on in the future, we don't want to do something under this planning process that blocks off the addition, a future addition. So we want to identify areas for future expansion. We want to look at the structural flexibility. Masonry bearing buildings are harder to add onto than structural steel framing, so we want to understand that and the nuances of that, and we want to see how things work on the site. The flow of the students and the staff within the building, how do people move around? You know, I was over at Lincoln the other day, and a couple of the science classroom doors are propped open, but you've got kids coming in and kids coming out. It's at the end of a hallway. There's a stair coming down, and there's this kind of confluence of people all at one time with passing periods, and it's just a little too tight and crowded. So they end up putting, you know, wood foot wedges under the door because it facilitates the kids moving through. Doors have closers; they're supposed to be kept closed. So we're trying to figure out, you know, even simple things like an electronic hold open keeps the door open, meet the fire code, and facilitates that flow. But if there's another way to look at maybe how we could make the flow work better, we're going to try to do that. We want to look at the variations within the building and across the district. So if you've got classrooms in one building, some are very small, some are very, you know, are more adequate size. We want to look at that comparison, because if we can best utilize smaller rooms for other uses or for uses with smaller number of students, we'll try to do that. The suitability of the spaces with the natural light, acoustical issues are huge now in classrooms. And I think, Dr. Hyde, you were in a room when the unit ventilator kicked on. And if you're a young kid and a young student and you're trying to listen to the teacher and that unit ventilator comes on, you know, you can't make up the words. You don't understand the context in which things are saying. Adults have developed that ability to kind of read between the lines and add context, but kids don't have that yet. So acoustical is becoming far more important in how we're looking at that. And then I keep talking about this flexibility of spaces for what we know and what's unknown. If we can try to make it work for as many knowns in the future, then there's a good chance it's going to work for those unknowns that are going to come on. So these are the areas that I want to talk about in a little bit more detail, and just go through these. In the core classrooms, we're looking at the furniture. That's loose furniture and built-in casework. If you're trying to rearrange the room quickly from going from one learning activity to another learning activity, the furniture needs to have the ability to move around. We're finding furniture is a very cost-effective way to actually increase the flexibility of rooms. The finishes, the paint and the flooring, and what we call the fit, which is display areas, wall-mounted writing surfaces. How does the technology work in that space? And then the qualitative issues that I mentioned a moment ago. So we're looking at all of these in every one of your core classroom areas. The kindergarten classrooms, we're looking at you know, the evaluation of the current rooms, very similar to how we're looking at the core classrooms. But we know that there's been some discussions and some surveys about full-day kindergarten. So we think that as part of this master planning study, we need to at least take a look at what's the implication. And there really are two options from a facility point of view. You go to full-day kindergarten, you know, a classroom that was used for a morning and an afternoon session is now just used for one session a day. So you're not quite doubling, but you're almost doubling your number of your classrooms. Can that happen all at each building with the addition of some extra kindergarten classrooms? Or is there a centralized solution, a more effective way to do that? So we know that none of this has been talked about at the board level. It may come out as part of the strategic planning, but we think as part of the master facility planning process, it's a good practice for us to take a look at what's the facility cost and the impact of those facilities to you. So we're going to be providing you that information. The early childhood program. Jefferson is a building. Tired is the word that I use to describe Jefferson. It's seen better days. It needs some upgrades. It also, by serving a specialized population, the early childhood learning has special needs, and that wasn't how the building was originally built. So we want to look at how does that building best work for early childhood. It has tremendous circulation traffic needs with students coming and going midday, with parents dropping off and picking up. and where it's located, some of the Emerson parents stopping on the street as well, and buses. There's really quite a heavy traffic situation there from a parking and parent drop-off and pickup and buses and conflicts with Emerson that we really want to look at and try to see how can we best serve that. So we're looking in particular at the early childhood program and a holistic view at Jefferson and what might need to be done there to refresh that building. The large group spaces. I mentioned the space classification. If you take the Learning Resource Center, the gym, cafeteria, auditoriums in your elementary schools, it's about 25% of the usable area of the building. That's a large amount of space. That's a space that should be utilized for learning to support learning a lot of the day, as much of the day as possible. So we really want to look at how do we make those spaces work as flexibly as possible. When you have to make a changeover from lunch to gym, how does that happen? You know, when you need something to happen in the auditorium space, how does that happen? You know, old chairs that creak and make it hard to have instruction going on, making those spaces, the auditorium spaces, accessible. There's a number of different things that we're looking at in those areas. But we are really looking for them to support what happens in the classroom and have the ability. A lot of times, if a kid wants to, part of the educational program is for a student to make a presentation. You know, your auditoriums are these wonderful, comfortable spaces for small kids to make presentations. They're not getting lost in there. But how can that work better? How can you help in that public speaking part of what you do with the kids with those spaces? So really, it is about exploring how these spaces best support learning. We know there's some work to do in those areas. The educational support spaces, what's the impact of the push-in versus a pull-out model of delivering a special education program? So that has an impact. I mentioned earlier where these small group spaces are located. Right now, you actually have some small group spaces that are located inside of classrooms. So if I'm a student from a third grade class, I have to walk through a kindergarten room or a first grade room to get to my support space, which is on the small group space, which is located inside of the room. It was really designed to be an ancillary space to the classroom, but you're making use of the space as a small group space because you need it. So you're really tight in some of the buildings, and we want to look at that carefully. And then is there adequate support spaces for staff? The staff needs to have a place to get together, to talk, to plan, especially middle school planning. Those are areas that we're looking at. So this is the elementary art and music that we're looking at, and this is just a comparison across your buildings. You can see there's a little bit of a variation here in the size of the room for art. And in music, some places you have music rooms that are located. Some they're located nicely at the end of a hall so that when the noise that's made or the beautiful music that's made, it's not disrupting. But some, you go to field here, your stage, and on a cart, and in a kitchen. And on a cart, bless you, when a student, when music is on a cart, that music classroom becomes the room next to the next other classrooms. And so that's constant moving disruption. So we want to take a look at this. The use of the stages for music, it's people have gotten very creative where they put some of that movable storage units across the front of the stage to protect anybody from falling off. But these are things that we want to look at and do a pretty detailed comparison of. Other areas, science, with the change in the program, the next generation science standards, we want to look at that. Safety issues, how do you always design, for safety when you're looking at science labs? I was at some of the schools the other day, and just the big bodies in those rooms, some of the middle school kids, and where they put their coats, where they put their books, and then how do they move around when they're doing experiments. We want to make sure that we have those adequate safety zones. The foreign language spaces, the middle school exploratory programs, we want to take a look at those spaces because those are specialized spaces. And then some of those offerings are held in core classrooms. We want to look at how those work. The district office space, the district office is tight. It's used for some teacher training and teacher development, staff development. The lower level is not handicap accessible. I usually say lower level, but that is a basement. The basement is not handicap accessible. So we want to look at what it would take to that office. But at this point, once we identify what the programmatic needs are, it's worth exploring a range of options. Is lease space better than fixing that space up? So again, there's no commitment that any of this is to be done, but this is the exploration that we're going through so that you have all of this information as you start to look at the big picture. You can make decisions knowing what overall issues might be coming up in the next 5 years within the district. So we're continuing the analysis with the district design team. We're defining the scope for each of these individual projects. We'll work with Nicholas on the budget, And then we need to look at these projects in the context of the facility needs, just like we need to look at the facility projects in the context of the educational needs. We will get back to this. You saw this before, the prioritization, so projects can be prioritized, so you have an understanding of what the highest priorities are from our review and the administrative discussions. And then the goal here, this is our continual improvement model. How can we look at these buildings over time, spending a little bit of money each year, be continually to be kept in good shape from a facility perspective, and also then perform better from an educational perspective. So that is the introduction to the educational planning side. Are there any questions?
What are you seeing in the future as far as like chalkboards? Because when I teach religious ed, I
Yes.
go in there as, becoming a corkboard of artwork or.
Yeah, we're putting in. I can't think of the last time I put in a chalkboard or a blackboard. We're mostly putting in whiteboards. Although there's some people the marker dust is there as well as the chalk dust, but the chalk dust is worse. So the marker boards seem to be more flexible. Writing surfaces, we put in glass for people to write on. We're looking at a lot of these surfaces going floor to ceiling. If you use some of the rolled products or the paint products, that what that allows is that younger kids, they can access it at the lower height. And so if you have some rooms, it's good, so you don't just mounting a board at one height. We're seeing a lot more of it go up. Whole wall surfaces try to be created with marker boards so that there's a larger area to write on. A lot of it's magnetic so that you can use it for pinup as well.
One question I have for the administration, actually, kind of, but it'll affect this is, and I know we talked about this a few years ago. One of the inputs to this is the CASARTA study from 2013. A few years ago we looked at it. We didn't find it was materially different at the time, which was sort of surprising to me. But then when you looked at how they got to their numbers, they were looking at things a year or so before that even. And then last week you presented us with what are we going to do about all this new building that's going on in construction, and those numbers did not seem to be consistent with the CASARTA, but I could be wrong. Are they using the numbers with the new things, or should we think about demographic studies again? I just wanted to ask what your opinion was. I don't know, but we have this CASARTA study which says we're somewhat stable, and then we had a presentation last week saying, watch out, a bunch of people might be coming if you use the Naperville formula, I believe it was, the Naperville model. So I didn't know if it was, I don't want to do these every year or every 2 years, but I didn't know if maybe we did that one prematurely and something might be a recommendation I thought I'd ask.
Typically, you don't do those any sooner than every 5 to 7 years.
Right.
It was 4 years between the one that we did in 2009 and then 2013. So I wouldn't recommend. The 2013 had a CASARTA study as a part of their research had talked to the city and looked at what was on the drawing tables, and so that those were very likely, some of them, maybe not all of them, included in there. Okay. And as I said last month, with that Naperville, and I always put that in quotes, those kids may materialize and they may not. It's really, that formula is best suited for single-family homes, although they have a component of that formula that deals with multifamily, so either townhouses and/or condos.
Sure.
It's just not. It's hard to predict when it's condos.
Okay.
1 and 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, you probably get some kids out. 1 and 2, I think, is very iffy.
Okay. I just wanted to ask because I walked away last week with the sense of, watch out for this, and I wanted to make sure they were aware of anything we were doing so that.
And then we're looking to decide if we want to go to a cohort survival, just to run those numbers individually, building by building, to see if that would yield any different data than the district-wide look that CASARTA provides us.
And I think, in facility planning, we need to have some flexibility. You need to have some flexibility. You need to say what happens if another section comes through at this grade level and it's a bubble moving through. These things aren't designed that closely. But if something's on the cusp, we want to take a look at it. I also would say that if you have to add a classroom somewhere because we just know long term that's the right thing to do, adding 1 classroom is a very expensive proposition. Adding 2, is a little more cost-effective use of, and it might be just for a little bit more, you get that second classroom, you build in some flexibility. So there's practical applications that we want to take a look at as you do that.
Yes.
Dr. Hines, the many exhibits that are included in the CASARTA report do break it down by building. It's just that we tend to focus on the district as a whole.
That being said, to echo Scott, I went back and looked at old reports from several months ago for the last meeting, and I noticed that the numbers were different. And I suspect that they may be somewhat different. So in your presentation here, one of the things that you are going to be doing is analyzing space needs and flexibilities.
Yes.
Well, if you know, our matriculation levels do increase, obviously we will have to be somewhat flexible. So what is the timeline that you're looking at to be able to come up with some sort of comprehensive plan so that if in the next 6 months we have to add a small area of space, but the trends show that in 2 years we're going to need quite a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, down is always easy to deal with. Up is much more difficult.
Well, we're committed to keeping to the original schedule, which is to come back to you at the June meeting with the report. I think then, as you see all of the projects, you need some time to kind of digest that. You know, we're asking you at that time to accept that we've completed the report. You know, you can kind of digest what those are. We've actually, it seems like since we started, the questions kind of pop up once every week. What about this? What about this? Because there's new, things. We'll be dealing with one later tonight. So we're ready to respond as need to be to try to look at different buildings, different facility needs, different classroom needs. We've actually been asked some questions about, how can we fit a classroom in here, a classroom in there. So I think that in understanding the buildings and going through the reports, we may have the opportunity to move pretty quickly on some temporary measures, by temporary 1 or 2 years. The longer term items usually take, close to a year from, a smaller project from planning and design. So we want to try to have this information so you can react as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. But I would anticipate that hopefully by the fall you kind of be ready to lay out, this is our 5-year plan, here's how we'd be able to finance it, and then you'll see how tight you are in a particular building and what kind of numbers we have to watch on a monthly basis. I mean, we get the monthly reports too, so we're watching those as well. So does that answer?
It does, and that leads me into just a final thought. When you analyze this, is it somewhat formulatic, or are you really creatively thinking outside the box? For instance, we have Jefferson, reutilizing Jefferson, or for a couple of different ways and a couple of different reasons is a possibility. Reutilizing some spaces inside the building. So I guess my question is, how formulatic is it, or are you being very creative with some of the options to play with?
I think what we want to do is present just that, options. Some options may be straightforward, and some may be things that nobody had considered, but we think may be good long term. And that's our job, is to present you with that range of options. So, and again, it's not. At this point, what it's about identifying needs and setting budgets that will resolve those needs. A full design process will be undertaken once you say go ahead with this project. Sure. And we may explore 3 or 4 more options at that point. The key is we have a budget for that project, and if we can find something that works better at that time, we're going to do that too. So this is not the be-all and the end-all. This is saying these are the needs. Here's what a reasonable budget is to take care of these needs. And if you say go ahead, then we'll go through the normal design process, kind of throw everything out and start over.
Right. One other question, if I may follow up, is as you're going through the creative solutions stuff, one thing we've talked about on and off for a couple of years has been the notion of full-day kindergarten. Mm-hmm. We've always moved it down the road, especially with you coming on board. We wanted to kind of, not throw that in your basket right away. But will this plan have some sort of definitive set of answers of, if we were to explore this will be the consequences and the decisions? And
we are definitely going to look at
Perfect.
2 options, adding on to each building to accommodate full-day kindergarten in each building, or
using a building
okay. For the kindergarten programs.
Perfect.
And again, you haven't talked about this. All we're looking at is purely from a facility perspective.
Right here.
Wonderful.
Okay?
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Next up on the agenda is the first action item for tonight, discussion of the physical education wall at Washington School. I don't know who's going to come up and speak of that.
Well, we have a few of us here.
Okay.
So I guess I'll start off if that's all right.
Sure.
Stephanie's, oh, okay.
And by the way, this is on page 11 of your packets.
Right. So we went out to bid for the replacement wall at Washington, and that's the divider wall in the gym that we saw when we were at the Washington board meeting. We opened the bids on the 21st of April. Nicholas and Associates reviewed with RB Construction, who was the low bid for the project. They reviewed the scope of work. Everything looks to be in order. And Nicholas and the administration is recommending that the wall be put up by RB Construction for a contract amount of $135,000. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Scott, go ahead, Bob.
Oh, and I think one question I might have asked Scott, but maybe you could, earlier you could comment on was the wall there is something as we look at the schools and you know, FGM looks at them, is that something that we think is a good solution to have going forward?
I can have Stephanie Daly, the principal at Washington, elaborate on that, but the answer is yes.
Absolutely. I've got a lot of thought to this process too, because this is a lot of money. But looking at Washington and our space, we have 3 classes at one time in gym. So that's up to 75 kids, and that wall divides in half so we can have 2 learning spaces. Next year, we're going to be putting 2 fifth grade classes together, which are large bodies, on one side to utilize because we only have the one gym. So this project would be something that would help us going down the line for years. We tried opening it Friday, and pieces fell out of the ceiling and crashed, so we had to stop and peek through. So this is something I've given a lot of thought to, knowing it's a lot of money, but knowing kids' education comes first, and this is a space that we use for instruction the whole day.
And is Washington, this year at least, not part of the summer school program?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question that kind of relates to this. So we brought Nicholas and Associates in when we were having some issues, I think, at this building, trying to get heat and air regulated. And I'm noticing now that Nicholas and Associates is staying with us throughout all of our construction processes here. And I guess I just would like some clarification on what their role is. So I see an architect here. I see Nicholas and Associates. I know what the architect does. I know it. And then I see the general contractor, RB Construction. So how do we envision Nicholas and Associates roles going forward? Because a lot of times we have an architect, we have a general contractor, we have the subs. It seems like we have someone else in there. I just want to kind of better understand that.
Do you want to take that, Kerry? Or?
Now, maybe just in general, from a construction delivery is the term we use, and the traditional way that had always been done up until about 20 years ago was in schools was design, bid, build. The architect would design the project would go out to bid, and a contractor would be selected, a low responsive contractor. The problem with that is that we were getting contractors who were not doing good work. And so the construction manager role, which has been used for years in construction, really came into the public school market. And so instead of bidding those services as part of the general contractor's role, you would hire a construction manager, and they would be, just like we are, your consultant in a professional relationship, and they would manage the project. So, what they do is basically you don't pay for the general contractor to do a lot of the management work, and Nicholas is paid to do that management work, and they're watching out for your interest. They don't have their fiduciary interest is not to make money off the construction project; it's to serve you well, just like an architect is. So, in this particular project, given the summer duration, we did talk about it. Trying making sure things could get done, being able to coordinate make sure the subcontractor's work was done. Nicholas was part of the team in putting it together, and they'll be basically now taking this project as it moves into construction, whereas we had prepared all the bid specifications and documents. So from a delivery point of view, I think it gives you a much better quality of work, a much better assurance as the projects get done on time and they get done to the kind of quality that's specified in the documents.
So from a delivery standpoint then, the price that we're paying the general contractor will be less than it was traditionally a couple of years ago because some of that role is being taken away from them and given to Nichols.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Now, on smaller projects, it gets a little bit tougher. Bigger projects, it's probably cheaper to have a construction manager, and there's some savings. On smaller projects, it may not be cheaper, but the quality and getting work done on time is critically important to you because school construction is a very short window.
Yeah, and then RB, will they self-perform this or will they sub this out?
There are several, there's a steel contractor on the job, and these guys are under RB's contract because of the nature of the work. There's a drywall, there's a painting, I believe there's a separate demo contractor, so there's a series of subs that are under RB. So you have a single contract with RB.
And they'll sub out.
And they'll sub out to those.
Some of the trades
Yep.
handle that, okay.
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Tony.
I had similar thoughts to having Nichols and Associates. I thought that we were going to use them for a specific reason, primarily here in that field. Is it your intention that you're going to make a recommendation that we start utilizing them as a permanent methodology going forward?
Yeah, we did say that.
We did. I'm sure we've done that.
Yeah, you did say that a
Yeah.
while back.
Right.
Yeah, we had a long discussion about construction managers versus general
But-
contractors.
But even in a smaller job like this, I mean, what we did at Carpenter here is vastly different from putting up a movable wall in a gymnasium.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. The thought process would be to continue under the construction management model, which we've discussed, and that you could pick and choose what projects you would want them to work with. We could certainly do that if there was a directive or some type of a direction. But overall, once you go with the construction management process, that's how your construction projects move forward. And it is a benefit to the district. It really is. There's as we talked about, the cost of managing the project through construction management is less than the cost of it through a general contractor. They're our owner's rep. They're hired to represent us and make sure the project comes in on time. Where a general contractor's motivation, and nothing against general contractors, but their motivation is to make more money. So, they'll come in with a bid and then they'll go back to the subs and the contractors and try to get a little bit better pricing from them. And, sometimes there can be some issues with that. So it is really, not only is it more cost effective for the district, it really helps protect the district and the projects. It truly is a very popular and very excellent way to do projects.
The flip side of that was the amount of the bid that came in was definitely different than what I was understood to be
Yes.
a ballpark number. Any idea on why that went up? Timing, materials?
When we originally talked, I was thinking it was going to be in the $95,000 to $100,000 price range. I know that FGM, sorry about that. I'm done. It's been nice working here. But FGM, they had $125,000 on the project. So we did have, the subs did come out and they did look at the project. They saw it physically, so they know exactly what's entailed in it. So it's probably a little bit more than what I originally thought it was, Dr. Browley. It is.
I've been to the building, so I can attest to, at least it's very apparent to me, this is something that needs to be done. I just want to make sure by your recommendation, we've had a few conversations for the last few meetings about capital resources and capital projects and where we're going to go and the precious limit that we have. So I just want to make sure that I'm presuming correctly that by you proposing this, you think $135,000 of our limited capital supply is the highest and best use of this $135,000 in the district.
Yeah. Well, I know Becky can answer that, but I can answer that as well. There is no question in my mind.
I just want to make sure I understood very clearly. You said this is the fire we got to put out right now.
This $135,000 has a direct impact on the education of children. It has to be a priority. In my opinion, it has to be, and I know that myself and the rest of the administration would not have brought it to you if we didn't feel strongly about it.
Becky, is there any bond money left over that might be pushed toward this project to somehow offset some of the cost of this?
This says it's going to be funded from the Capital Projects Fund. The entire $135,000
is coming from the bonds.
Correct.
And my final thought was, I realize that it's a multi-use facility and trying to maximize the use, but it's still a gym. It's supposed to be noisy. And I don't know enough about construction, but I certainly would want to know that every opportunity was given to alternatives prior to settling on the same old, be old, same old. We had a wall, let's just replace the wall. It worked before. What I'm looking for is thinking outside the box. And is there any other way to create this divider that would still be effective and yet save some money?
There was one other way to do it, and it certainly did not meet the criteria for the educational pieces, and that we could separate the gym permanently and turn it into just 2 learning spaces, but then we would lose the full space of the gym for other activities. So that thought, we talked about it with Stephanie, and absolutely would not work at all. But that was the only other way to obtain what we need and not do the movable wall, was to section it off permanently, and that would have been a drastic mistake.
I agree. Any other thoughts or questions? Well, it is an action item, so we will need to have a motion.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve RV Construction Inc. for the 2015 Washington Elementary School summer improvement work to be funded from the capital projects funds in the amount of $135,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, starting on Dan's side.
Yeah, I just have one comment. So
Sure.
I'm going to vote yes for this, and I just want to state a couple reasons. One of the reasons is it's obviously makes our facility more efficient. But the main reason I'm doing this is because you mentioned safety, and it sounds like right now the gym isn't safe, or you have some concerns with safety. And so we always put that as a top priority. So people might look at this and they might say $135,000 is a lot of money for a wall. But the reason that I think it's so important is because of the safety issue. So I'm going to vote yes.
I agree, aye.
Aye.
You said you agree?
Yeah. Aye.
Okay. One question is, once this is constructed, what's the lifespan of this?
This particular wall is 26 years old, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll probably do a 20-year lifespan, life cycle on it.
And once it's up, I mean, safety is, pieces aren't, you can have little metal pieces, but the wall isn't going to, I mean, it's...
No, that's not going to happen. But
Yeah.
there are some nuts and bolts and things from some of the mountings that are coming off.
My initial feeling is to vote no on this, I got to tell you. The amount of money is just beyond what I can fathom. I do feel better that some of it is coming from savings that we've, by prudently utilizing the bond money, there is some that we can slide over, and that's probably the only reason I will say yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay.
John,
Thank
you
you.
there?
Thank you.
Yep, I'm here, aye.
Aye, okay.
Did you say yes?
You did say yes. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have Jane Boyd is going to be next. And Vasiliki is going to be. Update on special education. And this is page 14 in your packets.
It's like page 40 or 50 for some of us.
50 for
50 for me, yes.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know what you're working off of.
You got the right thing.
Where does it show?
Yeah, that's like page 50.
Mine's 52.
I literally have page 14.
Mine's 50 of 204.
Special education in District 64.
Yep.
Well, in some of your pamphlets, it might be page 51. In my pamphlet, it's page 14. So it's somewhere in your pamphlets.
How is, I don't understand that.
didn't incorporate the GM. Yeah, that's what set it off. Okay. I held that separate. Yeah. This is actually the original packet without the architects incorporation. Yeah. All right. So that's thrown off. Okay, you're all set, Jane. Go ahead.
Okay, I want to start by thanking you for this opportunity to talk with you about the special education program and services and make sure that you are familiar with my co-presenter. Vasiliki is the assistant director, and this presentation really is the two of us presenting because the two of us did the work that went into this. We're really going to focus on two things. What does the data tell us about our programming, and where should we go moving forward? So there are 4 questions that are going to move through this presentation, and the information that we're providing really sequentially attempts to answer those. What achievement level are we at? How does that compare to other places? What do we know about service delivery? And then what should our plans be going forward? The first question really does focus on students with IEPs, student in special education. And then it drills down to how are they doing in terms of reading achievement and math achievement. And it is difficult to know what's reasonable and appropriate. It's common that special education students struggle academically. So we presented this in a way that we could compare our achievement for students with special education to some comparable other districts. We considered many data sources for the presentation today. Our first thought was to think about map data, since that's commonly used in this district. For this presentation only, you're going to see us use ISAT. And we picked ISAT because it's longitudinal data, so that we're able to go back many years, which wasn't as possible with MAP. Also, the ISAT data allows us to compare to comparable districts. You're going to see a lot of ISAT data, and it's all public data. So we were able to compare our scores with others. And then going forward, as I said, we anticipate setting goals and monitoring the future using MAP.
Jane, will the map allow you to do that same comparison? Will that be public data also?
That might be. You've heard from Lori Lopez in the past about trying to create a cohort of willing participants that exchanged map data. And so Lori's working on that project with general data, and we would hope that that might lead to being able to share special education. You will see one data point that links to achievement that will remain public. So we will be able to compare one of the data points you're about to see over time. It's accessible through ISBE.
Okay, thank you.
This is the first important graph, and I want to make sure you understand the source so that you could search it on your own. The Illinois Interactive Report Card is ISBE achievement data that is pulled together and presented by Northern Illinois University. So on your devices, you could be Googling IIRC now as I'm talking, and you would get to this chart, but you would get to similar charts for all districts. So we've taken one page of that. What you're looking at is, across many years, our ISAT reading scores. Let's start with the top line, which is the purple line. Those would be the students that do not have IEPs. You are seeing very wonderful performance in the 90s. Where you see that dip 2 years ago down into the 80s, that's the year they moved the ISAT cut scores. That dip is true for virtually every district in the state. So the top line would be the students without IEPs. Our presentation is going to talk more about the gold line. And if you take a look, do you see the 36? That's the percent of students with IEPs a year ago now, roughly, who met the standards on ISAT. We had 36% of our students who took it with IEPs making it. The other important number on this graph is the 51. That's the difference between the two subgroups. So how far apart are our students in this area is what this graph brings forward.
Jay, one thing I am looking at is in the purple line,
yes,
the drop when the cut scores were changed,
yes,
and then the drop in the yellow line. Would they not have been in a ratio, a seemingly similar ratio, It seems like it went from, on the purple line, it dropped about 10 percentile points, whereas the bottom line was over 30.
For me, what that meant was that our passing students at the 69.7 were just over the line. They were not well over the line like a lot of the purple students.
So would that be similar to other districts who, the cut scores were changed, they appreciated a 30% drop in some of their cut scores, where we appreciated about a 15?
I haven't studied the difference in drop.
Okay.
But you're about to see, we did study that the trend of the gold line, so that 36 number, we're about to compare that. And then we've spent a lot of time looking at the gap size, which is another one that the state focuses on, is how large is our gap compared to other districts. So this was reading, and now we'll take a look at math. Again, the same pattern of the purple line dropping at cut score time, and then another very large drop in the gold line. Again, we're in the area of about a 50-point difference between the two subgroups. ASPE would want us to always be minimizing the gaps in all areas, whether it's special education or other subgroups. Now to bring some meaning to 35, 36, how is that? 50-point gap, how is that? We spent some time trying to identify what we considered appropriate, corresponding, similar districts. So these 6 were selected. They're all similar in size, they're all elementary, and they're all demographically similar, which when you're looking at achievement is an important factor. So over and over now in this presentation, you're going to see our scores compared to the scores of these 6 districts. I didn't want to be distracted by who's in first place among the 6, so you don't see them separated out. You'll just see us compared to the scores of these 6 in many presentations. Here we're looking at, let's start at the bottom, the 36 and 35 that you saw on the graphs. Those same points now are presented for the other 6 districts. So our students with IEPs, 36, 37%, 35, 36% passing ISAT. The comparable districts range from 41% up to 75% of that same group of students, same ISAT test, same period of time. The other thing that we really wanted to help you take a look at was our gap size. So the gap in District 64 in this time period, the 50-51 you saw on the charts, when we went to those same charts for those other districts, now you're looking at their gap sizes. They range from 21 points between the purple and orange line, and then the other districts go all the way up to 45, with our gaps being the largest of all. We discovered when we were looking through data that you get a different picture when you take a look at our science scores, and we are going to be talking about why that is. So now what you're looking at are those gap sizes between the purple and the gold lines for the same subgroup. What I see when I look at this is now our score of 29 puts us right in the pack. So other districts there's one district at the same score, others are at very similar scores. What's important to know is for students with IEPs in this district, we are presenting science material to them in a very different way. For science material, these students are remaining in science classes. They're having contact with core science curriculum. They're interacting with the general education science teachers, virtually all the students with IEPs. That's the important difference that you're seeing.
Is that not occurring in reading and math?
It is not occurring in reading and math. We'll go into that a little bit more, but what's typical here would be IEP students, science, remain in gen ed. IEP students, math and reading, switch to a special education location. That would be the common practice. And just to clarify, that is a traditional practice that was common in most districts 10 or 20 years ago. So the model that we're seeing, it doesn't reflect on any employees here. It reflects on how it was done many places. is in some ways how we're still doing it here.
And Jane, can you comment on the reading and math? The students who have IEPs, are all of those students in a separate outside regular classroom setting, or are there some that, based on the, I know there's a slew of different reasons why IEPs would exist, or are some in, let's call it the regular classroom, and others? I just want to understand, is it a all out, or is it a portion mix?
That's about a perfect transition to the next 10 slides. So I'm going to pass it on because that's what we're about to explain.
Thank you.
Before we go to that side, on the science, would you say those other districts do it our way also, where they're pulling out for math and reading?
Yes.
And
And I also, when I prepared this slide, it occurred to me that since we're somewhat lagging in math and reading compared to these other districts, the fact that we're still holding our own with science, because in science curriculum, in science testing, you use math and reading. So this is a credit to the science teachers in this district that the gap's not there, because those other subjects would come over. But the model of keeping IEP students in science curriculum would be common across these districts. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, did you say in our comparable districts, they are also taking students out for reading and math and putting them in?
No.
They are not.
And
I want to make sure I understood this.
We're coming to the slides that'll
Okay.
explain that in the comparable districts, the students are more likely to remain in general education.
Okay.
And we're about to see that data.
Okay.
So we're going to take some time to learn about what the Illinois State Board of Education tells school districts about performance expectations and best practices. The Illinois State Board of Ed has instituted a system to work with school districts that need to work on their performance called focused monitoring. The next set of slides comes from what the state presents to school districts in this process. One of the most important things to remember is that students with disabilities are general education students first. They should have a general education classroom and have access to the gen ed curriculum, services, and interventions. Special education supports and services can be provided in any setting. Supports can be accommodations like books that students can listen to, and services can be a special education teacher going into the classroom and providing specialized instruction to a small group of students. A student can receive special education supports and services in the gen ed classroom, in a resource classroom, or in a self-contained classroom that they spend a lot of their day in. Each year, the federal government provides funding to school districts to use for special education. They also require states to monitor and audit their school districts for quality to make sure that school districts are doing a good job with their special education services. Illinois has selected to monitor least restrictive environment, or LRE. LRE refers to the legal mandate that requires, to the maximum extent appropriate, that children with disabilities be educated with non-disabled children or in the general education classroom. When making placement decisions, the IEP team must consider and select the least restrictive environment for a student.
So the team, what's the phrase of the IEP team? They are the individuals who make the recommendation that that child will either be in the classroom or out of that classroom, correct?
That's correct. And how much time they will be in the classroom or out of the classroom.
Okay. And then IEP team, there's various teams, or is it one team per building, or?
Each child has an IEP team, and that team consists of the general education teacher, the special education teacher, and then whatever related service providers the child needs.
So it's various individuals who make up these teams?
Exactly.
Okay.
So for most special education students, their needs are best met when placed in the general education classroom for 80% or more of their school day. As you can see, the national average is 61.5%. Our state is more restrictive than other states, and our state average is 53.5%. So monitoring for least restrictive environment makes sense for Illinois. The target set for elementary school districts in Illinois is 52%. This is also the target that the state uses to select districts for state audits. As you saw on an earlier slide, our district science achievement level for special education students was our strongest area and similar to other districts. Students with IEPs in our district receive science instruction in the general education classroom. This means our data confirms what is considered best practice across the country. In this chart, you can see that the areas that special education students participated more in the gen ed curriculum, like elementary reading in most districts, the achievement gains were higher. As participation in the gen ed curriculum decreases in most districts, like in middle school or even in elementary math, the achievement gains seen were not as impressive. So now that we've talked about least restrictive environment and how it impacts achievement of special education students, we will look at how our current special education service delivery model compares to state standards and to comparable districts. Here we see that during the 2012-2013 school year, 50.2% of our special education students spent 80% or more of their school day in general education. Last year's numbers are not yet available. However, since our service delivery model has remained the same, we're anticipating similar percentages. As we saw in an earlier slide, the state target set for elementary school districts is 52%. When we look at all elementary schools in Illinois, the average is 59%.
So what effect does that have on District 64 vis-a-vis their relationship to the state? Are we under watch? Are we under, I mean, what do they do at this point?
The state gathers together all of the elementary districts that are falling below that state target, and then they pick a certain number of districts every year to do focus monitoring or auditing with. We know for sure this year we were not selected, but any district below that cutoff is falling into that pool. And then when those two districts are selected, this year it was two large elementary, then a team of ISBE and others spend several days in that district conducting those focus monitoring visits or kind of performance audits.
Does that usually result in a change of practice policy, or is it increasing staff members? I just want to identify that any corrective actions, what financial impact that will have in the district.
There is not any direct, necessarily, financial impact to this. Each district that goes through their audit or focus monitoring has an ISBE employee that then follows them for several years afterward, making specific recommendations. In your district, we found this to be the case, so therefore, over the next, you need to institute this change. These numbers don't change quickly. That's why ISB remains on site. There's a lot of surveying done, parents, staff, kind of what's the root cause when the numbers are lower, and then they track those changes.
So this chart presents the data for the 6 demographically similar districts that were listed in an earlier slide. You can see that the state average for elementary districts, the state target minimum of 52%, and our percentage at 50.2% of our special education students being serviced in the general education classroom for 80% or more of their school day.
And when this shows, so when this is showing in general education, so that could be more than just math and reading.
The calculation doesn't focus on which classes. So, for instance, the top performing district in this category, the 77.3, that means 77.3% of the IEP students in that district spend 80% or more of their school day in general classes.
Can you tell me if that school district that had that 77%, 80% compliance, were they ranked on those numbers that we saw before?
Very high. There was we looked and looked. So you're seeing 6 districts. We've looked at 20 or 30 across the time we studied this, and we often found the higher a district was on this chart, the higher they would be on the achievement chart. That's why ISBE doesn't monitor achievement. SBE monitors just this number, just the 50.2, because best practice says across the country, when this number goes up, the achievement goes up. And we did find that. So the next question really is, based on the data, where do we go from here? And we really wanted to start with some of the strengths that are already in place. So we have come to appreciate dedicated, hardworking, student-centered special education staff. So the people are there. Wonderful people. There's already been one portion of our program that's moved far in terms of LRE, and that would be the Jefferson Preschool Program. They use a blended classroom model, which means that most of the students with IEPs spend most of their time in kind of a split class, blended, in our case, between tuition students and IEP students. So we're already a model among preschools for LRE. The next strength here is that the data indicates for our students with significant special ed needs, we are appropriately educating them in our schools. You aren't seeing the subset of data for the most significantly disabled students, but our rate of putting students in self-contained classrooms and our rate of sending students to more restrictive schools, very commendable numbers. So that's a strength, we're already there. Another strength we already have is that the data tools to move us along, the MAP tool, the AIMSweb tool, we already have the data tools to make this change and monitor this change. And then it's important that you realize that there are already many examples in both elementary and middle schools where the decisions are being made to keep students in general education more of the time. There's high variability. So that 50.2, there would be differences between the 2 middle schools, differences across the 5 elementary schools. That system of schools or school system definitely plays out in the LRE and IEP decisions across our schools.
Jane, you just mentioned something that kind of made my ears perk up. I'm led to believe by this data that we are keeping less of our special education students in standard classes, but yet we're not, those specific individuals, we're not putting them into outside institutions or outside facilities.
Correct.
Now, is that because we have less students in this district who have those needs, or because those students are being mainlined? And if they are being mainlined, then that doesn't hold true with the data that just, we have less than 52%. So obviously they're being taken out of the core classrooms, but yet students with extra needs are not being sent out. So are we holding them back and making one large mix of special education students, or we just have less of those students who have those particular needs?
I think we have the same graph or bell curve shape of disabilities as any place else.
Okay.
The big difference, and there's actually 4 different levels, 5 levels of service. So our low number is that 80% or more in gen ed. Then we have an unusually high number, which is students who are 40 to 79% in gen ed. Think of those students as split day.
Okay.
About half the time in their homeroom class, about half the time in special ed. We have too many in that one group.
That answers the question.
We need to move that group over into the next column.
Yes, that's a succinct answer.
Is it fair to say that not only is our bell curve or our kind of scatter of the special ed students kind of equally distributed like other districts, but the percentile of students in our district who are special ed, is that similar to those other districts?
We could have put that in. It's part of the report card system. We're slightly above. So we're running at, I just checked, 16% of the students in the district, 700 students. 16%. The state average is 14 or 15. So we're above, but not in a significant way.
And then if you add the 504 plan students, is that number similar to other districts?
The number of 504 students is surging in every district I'm aware of. So it's a hugely expanding number because the federal government redefined eligibility.
Right. I remember we talked about that last year.
Yeah. But
that's
there,
not about, right.
And when we switch over to MAP, we would be able to create a purple and gold chart for our 504 students in the future.
Great.
And compare those two.
Okay. Thank you.
Have you identified a specific reason for an increase in 504? Is it allergies or I mean, is there any one specific, or it's just spread out across the continuum?
The medical condition that's most changing that I'm aware of are the number of students with diabetes.
Diabetes.
Yes, and that almost all school districts are experiencing a very big increase, and those students are automatically guaranteed a 504 plan. In our community, we have the usual allergies and ADHD, kind of typical.
Yeah.
So first we looked at some strengths. Now we're looking more at the best practices that we really need to expand on. These are our areas for improvement. We need to make sure that data is used to make decisions on the individual student, team, grade level, intervention, school, and district levels. Some of that, individual student decisions, it's happening, and we're not at zero, but this is a great area of expansion, and I see myself partnering with Lori Lopez in this area, that we're using data more to make our decisions. The second thing we need to be looking at is that eligibility for special education provides increased access to services and interventions, rather than what sometimes happen right now is the opposite. So students in general education, and then we're adding on a powerful math intervention, and they're getting kind of the double package of effective, and then they go to the IEP meeting and the team says, oh, you're special ed now, so you should leave the general education classroom and the intervention that we're helping you. We have teams doing that right now, and that's something we need to turn around. We need to make sure that special education students have access to Tier 3 scientifically researched interventions in the areas of math, reading, writing, and social and emotional learning. We are strong in the area of reading already. A lot of literacy programs, literacy teachers, that would be our area of strength in Tier 3. We have room to grow in terms of math, writing, and social and emotional learning. So that extra instructional time that special education students need. Another area for us to grow would be that all students provide the options of services and supports within the general education environment, so that every building consistently offers the option of LRE to the students in this category. And then to support all of this, we definitely need high quality continuous professional development offered to support staff in all of these initiatives. So kind of where are we going with those best practices, what's already underway? We've been holding special education data review meetings in each school. We wanted to sit smaller group, just the special education staff, and really have them touch the data. So you've been looking at it, they've been touching it. And we decided we would visit each individual school, and we started in February. We'll finish in May, we have one school left. So we wanted to kind of bring it home and give a lot of interaction, question and answer. We do think we're going to need to do a lot of parent education, that the satisfaction surveys from CEC said that parents are happy with the programming. I don't think they realize there would be other options, so we have a lot of work to do there. We need expanded staff development and support, and some of that's already started, and plans for this summer are underway. And then it's important for you to know that 3 other initiatives, the Mastery Learning Committee that's already started, the Core Plus Committee that will start in a few weeks, and the strategic planning that's underway, they all, I see them appropriately aligning and moving our special education data in the direction we want them to move in. So this isn't a fourth project. These three large projects will blend well together to take us in the direction we need to go.
Jane, so as you make these changes, then I'm not familiar with the how the IEPs are structured. Would this require that you have to go in and redo a lot of IEPs, or is there flexibility sort of in there that allows for making changes that are in the best interest of the children?
The IEP process allows for amendments, but I've been very clear, because I'm asked this so many times, Jane, are we just supposed to go do all this tomorrow? And my answer is very much no, that we need to build capacity in the system. We need teachers that are able to do this. So one meeting at a time. I attended a first meeting, it was way before we were talking about this, and the conversation was simply with a team of all the special educators in the building. I want to talk about this boy, and he's really doing great, and his math achievement, it's exceeding where he needs to be in math. So I'm not sure he should be in my special ed math class anymore. What do the rest of you think? And I'm quietly going, someone please agree. And then the room did. And then she said, but I think he might do better if there was a possibility of one of the aides that already works in our building helping him as he adjusts to math. Is there anybody sitting at this table that could possibly do that? Could provide a little bit of aid time so when he starts in math, he'll be successful. And I'm sitting there knowing about the numbers, thinking, please, somebody say yes, and they did. So one student at a time, those kind of discussions, I see that it's already happening. The changes are already happening. And a lot of the buildings that have seen this data presentation have said, can you please come back, Jane, and help us figure out where to start for next year? So spent a lot of time in many of the buildings. The special teachers are taking this to heart. They really care about kids. They really want to do the right thing. So I am spending a lot of time. What part, Jane, what piece makes sense for us next year? Those discussions are happening. But it can't just be flip the switch. We're talking about a lot of students. We have to make sure that the teachers are ready and have the capacity.
So, and before, and I'm not advocating anything, it's just a question. Did you say before there are approximately 700 students with IEPs?
Yes.
So if we were to sort of move from 50% to 60%, spending 80% or more of their time in the general education, that would mean, at least 70 students probably would over time need to make that adjustment.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm following your math.
Thank you.
Okay. In terms of how to watch this going forward, because I think we do need to keep a careful eye on this, we need to pick data points going forward. So I'm recommending that we consider this year the MAP baseline year. So we will be able to calculate at the end of the year the purple line and the gold line for MAP performance this year. And then this would be the baseline that we could track going forward. Are we closing the gap is what we're really going to be focusing on. Are we getting that 51 down? So that would be the plan going forward. And then that 50.2, that is a number we will be able to track every year. It should be just a few weeks now, and now I'll get the number for last year, but it comes out annually. Special ed directors have access. So the 50.2, I'm certain we'll be able to track that same number over the next couple of years.
Jane, the MAP test is given twice a year. Will you be better able to evaluate the data this time next year rather than after the first MAP administration? So do you need to look at a yearly basis to appreciate gains?
I think we can look at it that way and how many, but I think we also can just capture a moment in time like ISET did and look at where we are. Let's say we pick this year's spring data. Okay, what's the difference in purple and gold line this spring? And then set our sights on, we want the gold line to move. We want the gap to close when we give MAP next spring. That's the way I'm envisioning it, that we're going to watch those two sets of numbers. Almost all IEP students are individually have their numbers watched. So their IEP goals, their MAP Ames web charts, we're watching each one of them, and we can get better at that, which will contribute to the other number moving.
So when do you think would be the most appropriate time to come back to the board and give a follow-up report?
It's a really good question. Maybe next spring. We could also decide that last fall was the baseline. If the fall MAP scores were the baseline, then we could come back October, November after we'd reviewed the numbers. So I see more than one option, but I think for a while, since I see it as a priority, we need to talk to you annually about it, I think.
I'd like to see, the way you've described it is wonderful. I have a better understanding of it. But I think that if we had a preliminary report in the fall, and another one in the spring, what you're seeing is a change of practice.
Yes.
If the numbers move, that's what I'm more interested in. So if it's possible to crunch those numbers in that time frame.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like what Dr. Lopez is doing with the fall to spring. So.
Right.
We could add sped in.
Okay, so just kind of in summary, that there's a huge body of scientific evidence that when we integrate the service model and have students in a more integrated setting, that enhances their outcomes.
Jane, I'm really impressed with your presentation, both of you. I found this very clear.
Thank you.
With not a lot of edu-speak stuff that I can't understand, and I appreciate that you're not sugarcoating the data.
Thank you.
And so I'm shocked by a lot of this data. I'm curious if coming in, both of you, relatively new here, did you have a hunch that this was the case, or did these data surprise you, or?
Jim, Even, and I looked each other up. So I looked up Park Ridge before I took the job and found 50.2. As Jim was participating in the selection of me, he looked up my last district where I'd been for 7 years. I found a number a lot higher than 50.2. Okay. So we were both fixed on those numbers before I took the job. But in my last district over the 7 years, I worked on a similar project. So getting that number up was one of the big projects I worked on in that position. So I just feel like this is another opportunity to help students in a similar direction.
Great. I have two questions, if I may. The first is just, you did a great job comparing us with the comparable districts. Are the non-IEP numbers that we have, would you say with those districts you compared us to, are we comparable, are we higher, are we lower?
The purple lines?
The top one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget what color you were, but
close, but not always quite as high.
So they were even higher.
So
in
yes.
general, they were a little bit higher.
Yes.
Okay. And second, no, I would second what was just said. This was a really well constructed and cohesive argument. I mean, obviously, being a layperson, you'd say, why wouldn't you do that? And so my question is, who would disagree with this, and what would their argument be? Is there anyone in the district who would say, I'm not so sure we'd go here, and what would the reason maybe be? I'm just kind of curious, because it seems very obvious to me, and that's when I always say, someone's going to not agree with this, and what might that be?
We, in order to achieve that, even if it's 50 to 60%, we will be redefining the role with special education students for some math and reading teachers in this district. So right now, those teachers, now he has an IEP, now he's going somewhere else to learn the curriculum. And we will be, if we make this improvement, giving them support, introducing things like co-teaching, and helping them see that there is a way to do this successfully, and that we're going to help them do that. I feel like that's the group that we're asking the biggest change of. Okay. The special ed teachers we've already talked to, they're just responding with, show me how to do it, Jane. It would be more general education teachers, but we're not really changing science, for instance, at all. Mm-hmm. So it's really more math and reading teachers, which is all elementary teachers.
Mm-hmm. So that would be where there would be, it's unknown, there'd be a hesitation or something. So is the approach we're taking to address that barrier, is that purely professional development, or have we had meetings with them to get a reconnaissance on what they're thinking now and what they'll require? I'm just kind of curious our approach to get around that roadblock, if it is even a roadblock.
In our 7 6 presentations so far to the special ed staff. One of the most common responses was, when are you telling Gen Ed?
Right, so when are we telling Jen?
I think I just did.
Okay. So what you're saying is we need to now have a campaign with them to illustrate this, to convince them, and to get buy-in from the staff.
Absolutely, I think that's the next step. And the Core Plus committee that's being created will be leading a lot of this, and we're being very intentional about trying to make sure general education teachers are a part of that.
Okay, any early reconnaissance, or I'm just curious?
I don't know, you can see them, I can't.
No, I don't know. Okay. I'm just curious, that's all, because I do know how hard change initiatives can be. And so I was just kind of curious what we're in for so that I can set my expectations of when you might see needles moving. You know what I mean? Because
the good news is I think I'm already seeing movement.
Good.
If I could piggyback on that, I think also, and you mentioned this in one of your earlier slides, I don't know if you skipped over it or just wasn't paying attention for 5 seconds, but parent education. I think that a lot of parents are pushing for pull-out, and if it's not out of the classroom, that it's not special enough.
Right.
And so I know from my work with parents doing learning disability evals, they all want to get the kid out of the classroom.
Yes.
But if the data suggests very strongly that that's not what's best for the child, then we need a cultural change, both in and out of the school. And I think a lot of education with parents can convince them that what's absolutely best and what's happening better in other districts is doing it this way.
Yes.
You could get some buy-in. The IEP meetings will be very different.
Yes,
Yeah, that's very
absolutely true.
So if I'm a math teacher and I'm a good teacher and I got really good scores, and now I get 3 children with IEPs coming in, will that, assuming I continue to teach well and my scores are good, will that negatively impact my results?
With those students would come collaboration time with a special education teacher to help you see how to differentiate, and potentially a special ed teacher co-teaching with you. So with the students comes the partner, and the data would say that that partner, part-time, full-time, actually could help all of your scores. Now there are 2 sets of hands. Now the 504 student, now the EL student. Now you have more time to do the gifted students because you have a second person participating in the instruction, and you've learned how to differentiate better rather than doing whole class instruction. So the LRE initiative can actually raise the scores for all of the students. And we saw in the other districts, the higher the EE code or that 80 plus, the higher both lines would go up. Right. It didn't adversely affect the top line at all to be more including special ed students in gen ed.
And Jane, can you remind me, so when we were comparing these, looking at these scores, ISATs, and we'll move to MAP, do all students take those, or does that just begin at a certain grade level?
Another great question. MAP in this district starts at 3rd grade. And we've had another tool called AIMSweb that we've used more in literacy, some in math in K-1-2. The Core Plus committee really needs to take a look at, are we using the right assessment tools in K-1-2? Okay. It's on that group's agenda to think about the best way to do that.
And but the data that we were looking at for the state, the percentage of students that are in general education, that was a K-8 number.
ISAT began in 3rd grade.
Okay.
So we were over and over looking at 3rd through 8th grade.
Okay.
The 700 students is a K-8 number. Actually, the 700 is a preschool 8th. And then the 50.2, that would be preschool 8th.
Okay.
Jane, if we incorporate these students into gen ed classrooms, how will that affect the new para regulations beginning in 16? Are they carved out? Are they included? How does that compute?
I am participating in how student growth might eventually be applied here. That the committee, our district committee, has a lot of flexibility with that. So the student growth will be included for special education teachers, speech and language therapists, a pretty large group, but we'll be able to decide together what works for us. And the requirement is not every student all the time. there are definitely options where we can say just this period or just this constitution test. And I think those kind of things we'll be able to take into account.
Okay.
In our district and the other districts, do we keep the children at grade level? Or is that the, you don't
when-
hold kids back?
This district does very little retaining. That would, and the research is so vivid that you mostly just have negative impact. And then when we're talking about putting them in general education instead of special education, we're talking about on grade level. So if you're a 7th grader and we're going to try and do more of an LRE approach and you're reading on a 3rd or 4th grade level, we have those students. We are talking about you participating in the 7th grade reading and language arts class differentiated. You're already in the 7th grade science class. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jane. Any other comments? This is great. I'm looking forward to the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Next item up to move things along, the Northern Illinois Health Insurance Plan insurance rates. Becky, this is an action item, folks. I have no idea what page it is in your books.
78.
78? Okay.
I got 78 too.
78.7.
And there happens to be in my book, it's page 44, but there's a nice graph that it's been corrected.
District 64 has participated in the Northern Illinois Health Insurance Plan, or NIHIP, for the last 4 years. NIHIP is a consortium of school districts that insures over 6,000 employees, and 28 districts participate in it. On Thursday, April 16th, NIHIP Executive Board released the rates for 2015-16. So you're really not approving the health and LTD rates and life insurance rates tonight. What I'm asking you to approve tonight is the change of dental carriers from Guardian to MetLife. We've been with Guardian Dental for 2 years, and they presented us with an 8% increase in our premiums. And NIHIP offers a dental insurance program through MetLife. 2 years ago when we went with Guardian, MetLife wouldn't even quote us and offer us a program. And this year they looked at our data and looked at our claims and said, you now are a better risk than you were 2 years ago. So they've offered us a rate renewal from our current program of 3.1%, and so I'm recommending tonight that we move the dental from Guardian to MetLife. Health insurance rates are going up for the 3 PPO plans by 3.5%, and the HMO plan will increase by 4.1%. Our rates have stabilized under NIHIP, and I would encourage you to continue to participate in that plan.
Becky, do we have a opt-out with that plan? Or it was a 3-year...
It was a 3-year commitment.
Right, and we are in year 2 or 3?
We are in we're going into year 4.
So have we renewed that commitment for another 3 years, or is it a year-to-year basis now?
It's now a year-to-year basis. I think by going to the MetLife Dental, they're assuming, although it's not in their bylaws that we have to stay for another 3 years, but that's kind of the unwritten, understood commitment. Again, NIHIP has been good to us with rate stabilization and the management of the program. And the type of information we get as an insurance committee far exceeds what we got prior to.
Okay. Any questions?
No, I can just say that I know the insurance committee was notified of the MetLife, and I didn't think I heard a single thing about don't do it, or I mean, it was a non-event. So not a peep. So I think everyone was okay with it.
Okay. And if the board is okay with it, we'll take a motion.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, adopt the Blue Cross Blue Shield, PPO, and HMO medical and MetLife dental insurance rates as presented for 2015-16 school year per the attached documents.
Second?
Second.
Why don't we start with Bob?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Okay.
John?
And John?
Aye. Aye.
Keep forgetting you there, John. Sorry. Okay, Beck. Next item on the agenda is another action item, technology equipment purchase.
So, in following up with the discussion that was started our last board meeting 2 weeks ago, hoping that the information that we had provided and the follow-up guideline points helped to fill in the picture. Are there any additional questions?
Well, today I received an email, I think we all received an email showing some data from previous discussions. And one thing came out, I don't have my email up, so I can't tell you a reference to it, but there was something that showed that in years 2 and 3 there was going to be very minimal expenditures. And I'm trying to understand the $793,000 per year expenditure, or maybe you can help me understand that expenditure. I'm looking at a table here, annual technology equipment purchase proposal and projection.
Right, so the 793, that's on page 3 of the memo. That is a projected amount as we start to operationalize a refresh cycle for the Chromebooks. So that would incorporate $325,000, which would approximately mean 1,300 devices that would be refreshed. That includes iPads, so about 1,000 Chromebooks and iPads each year. Breaks down to about $250 a device. I suppose some of what we need to wrap our heads around is that we made a huge initial purchase, and at some point, these devices will need to be refreshed. So as not to wait 4 years and then have to make another huge investment because devices are coming of age, whatever refresh cycle we decide, if we can spread that over time so that we can start to be able to cycle through our devices but not leave us in a lurch in terms of devices coming of age.
I'm just concerned about this chart, 2015, 2016 proposed.
Page 1.
On page 1, sure, okay.
You know, 142, 250, 175, 118. I added it and I got 435, 250 instead of 610, 250.
Where did we get that from?
Sketch. I keep saying we need to be better at math.
I was like, I don't
Especially your businessman.
That's just a difference of a couple $100,000.
It is 405, 250.
Oh, I apologize.
435.
435, 250, right?
I have 405. Let me run it one more time.
I was actually trying to lift the
35.
lift the amounts from the initial memo.
Doesn't mean that. Yeah, I get 435, 250.
That's what I get.
3 times that.
Understood.
So while you're looking up the math, my concern is, I understand you want to do on a refresh cycle and you don't want to wait 3 years to another 4,000, whatever number of computers. What I don't understand is we're 1 year into this and it looks like there's $1 million cost to this. According to the total here at the bottom of 15-16, apparently there's going to be some change. It might be about 250,000 less because the 610 figure is off.
Sure.
But I still don't understand. A year into this, we have to refresh to that degree or level. I understand the Samsungs that were purchased. Some of them are not working, but some are. I don't understand why we still don't have any usability with the Samsungs, and I would imagine that if they're not going to work, things usually, if they don't work right away, and then they have some lifespan to them.
Mm-hmm.
But arguably, it's been 1 year. I mean, wouldn't we expect them to last at least a little bit longer?
Well, the Samsungs would be in their year 3. And because of the particular model and device, what districts all across who've ever bought Samsungs are experiencing a lack of durability and reliability in the device itself. There are a couple of other developments in terms of components of Chromebook devices that, as my memo related, vendors are listening to districts to say, can we make this more reliable? Can we have a better Wi-Fi card in it? And vendors have made those improvements. So at the time when Samsungs were first introduced to the market, they were the best things that were out there for the price point. But what districts have found, and not just us, we're talking Glenbrook High School District, Maine South, Maine Township also experiences the challenges with the particular Samsung model that we're anticipating and we've experienced this year. So pertaining to Bob had asked a question about incidences that we've seen in terms of Samsung issues that we've seen over the course of the year. It's been about 22% of our fleet. So with those kind of reliability numbers, we're anticipating that if we can start our refresh, start building in and operationalizing a refresh, so we're not fit with a big price tag at the end, but over the course of time be able to start with those Samsungs, replace those, and then start to build in our refresh cycle, whether it's 3 years or 4 years. Because at some point, these devices would start to age out.
And I certainly agree with what you're saying. I guess I just look, MJ, at the, swapping out 550, purchasing 550 Chromebooks to replace the Samsungs. When I think, as Tony said, we know not every Samsung device is going to fail next year. And I'm just wondering, I understand that from an administration perspective, it's a very nice thing to just be able to say, yes, all of this class has a certain Chromebook. I know that, I can track that, how that's performing. But it just, to me, it seems like a lot to just swap out that whole grade's worth. I mean, instead of, maybe coming to some sort of median point, is almost you talk about with the Chromebooks going forward, looking at, phasing that. And I'm wondering, should we be doing the same thing with the Samsungs, to save ourselves some money? I mean, it looks like from the history of last year, and I think what you're proposing this year, it seems like we put an order in for a Chromebook and we get it the next month. So it doesn't seem like there's, a huge time lapse that if all of a sudden we start seeing Samsungs failing, we could just say, well, maybe we need to buy another 200 or something like that. And also, I think when we talked about the failure rates, I think I'm not sure how we factored in for the Chromebooks that we had to replace the screws on every Chromebook device this year, right? So that was like a failure on, in my book, that's like a failure on every device practically. Every Chromebook we had to do that. And so I'm just hesitant to just replace that entire block of Samsungs, that seems just not knowing that they're, or having an inkling that they're, a huge percentage are going to fail. And as you said, I mean, obviously, like the main high schools, they're a little farther ahead than we are, so their devices are a little older. This is our second year with these devices, and we would be going into year 3.
Right.
So I don't know. To me, it seems like a big leap to replace them all, all at once.
Well, if you would let me address, in some sense, so Samsungs, it's not that we wouldn't repurpose them. It's not that we don't have other places that we could use them. I know last year they were talking about having carts available for second grade and under as they start to use a lot more of Google Apps and start to work on keyboarding more and writing more and all that kind of stuff. So it's not that the Samsungs wouldn't find its use. It's that it wouldn't be deployed at a grade level so that we can actually have a lot more dependable of a product for that particular grade level.
I mean, I just think that if we replaced 250 of these and just meted them out as students handed in ones that failed, I mean, what if that gets us through the year? I mean, we don't know that, but we're talking about just buying 500 and without even knowing what the, how many are going to fail. And to me, it seems like purchasing a lot of product, and also thinking this is just going to keep going over time. So if we buy these now, they're going to have a certain life to them, and then we'll put ourselves on a path to sort of replacing all those again.
But I guess it would be a hard choice to make that this particular fourth grade class gets the Samsungs and could at any point fail, correct? That in the middle of a math test or a park test, it ends up, my particular device, because I have to be the ones that have the Samsungs this year, would now fail, and then I'm stuck in the middle of something. So in some sense, it's trying to plan and be assured of the dependability of the device in the midst of daily operation.
I understand.
But you're saying that if a computer does break right now, the turnaround time is 1 day. Is that, what did we say? We can get them how fast?
Well, no, I was talking about ordering them.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a contingency fleet that we can give a student either a Samsung or a brand new Chromebook if we have to. We have those in stock.
I mean, yes, we have things in place, but assuredly, that is some delay time. It's not that we can place a $200 or 200 count order and not have some wait time. I mean, we did experience that this year, trying to build up our contingency.
Yeah.
So we were waiting for 8 weeks, 10 weeks for certain, depending on our manufacturers, right? So, and depending on the demand of the device. So there was a huge demand of Chromebooks last year. There's going to be another huge demand as more and more districts go one-to-one. So as manufacturers are growing in that whole market as well, we're having to do a little bit of a dance. Assuredly, I would feel that if we could deploy and start to operationalize our refresh, we have we're providing our students a much more durable, reliable device, because we don't know when those critical moments are going to happen. We don't. We can't predict those. We don't know if there's another Dell screw up. I mean, we don't know. But in some sense, we can set up the best conditions so that we can carry that forward. So that we can have...
Hold on. John, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I had some comments too, but if you want to finish up on this particular line, go ahead.
All right, Vicki.
I just want to know how much is the device, because $550, you mentioned $250.
No, that's wrapped up with iPads, but if you want to just talk about Chromebooks, the price point is pretty much $315, including the, yeah. But we were already in talks with vendors, and because of the developments that are occurring, we could probably get that device for less now. But a more durable device with some of the redesigns and features that they've added to their next gen models.
Everybody okay? John?
Thanks. I guess first a couple of general comments, and then I've got comments on each of the line items of the table on this first page. I guess the general comments, the first one is that, we're starting to see our long-term financial projections barely make it to 2021, or in some scenarios not make it to 2021. And so in my mind, at least, I'm beginning to think, that we need to be even more watchful about how we are spending, than we've even been before, and we've been pretty watchful. Second, related to that, is the idea that the one-to-one program as it rolled out, I think, was a good thing, but we're over budget. we've run over budget because the district chose to spend all of its money for those Chromebooks rather than splitting the cost with parents. And probably the problems we're having with the Samsungs will also make it cost a little bit more. So those two things for me are kind of general background to what I think about each of these proposed line items. The kind of going from bottom to top, the iPad refresh, I'm actually holding an iPad 2 as I talk, and I'm still using it. I would probably be inclined to try to make those iPad 2s go one more year, since it seems like what's going to happen with those is that they will slowly become obsolescent, rather than that there's a date coming up sometime this year, by which they'll all turn into pumpkins. As far as the Samsungs go, I like Bob's idea of seeing if we can get by with fewer than 550. I sort of reluctantly understand that we need to do something with the Samsungs, perhaps even buying 550 of them. I know they just really have not done as well as they should have. And then I guess the top line item, the iPads for grades K through 2, those I have trouble supporting because those are not a refresh. Those are an expansion of our one-to-one program. And I think given where we are financially, both with the program in particular and overall, I don't think it's a good idea for us to be going beyond the ratios that we currently have for this year. So that's my reaction to the things in the table. And I think as it was pointed out a little earlier, the things in the table don't add up to 610, 250, so there may be other things lurking in here. And those I don't have any comments on yet.
John, you took some of the words right out of my mouth, particularly with the top line item. There's some new people here, so some people don't know that I was not supportive of the one-to-one initiative when it began. I thought we were going far too fast with too many grades and with too little data to support going at that rate. I'm even more convinced that I have not seen sufficient data that our one-to-one initiative from 3 to 8 is really doing all that it could be or should be, or that would justify the cost and the effort and the commitment. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing, but I just don't see the data. I know that the kids like it, the teachers like it, parents sometimes like it, but that's not sufficient for me. I need to see a lot more hard data that it actually is going to improve achievement long term, and that compared to students who don't have it, that there is significant difference between that. I'm concerned about younger kids having too much of a reliance on electronic devices, especially kindergarten. That's very concerning for me. I'm seeing a lot of information about kids younger and younger becoming myopic because they're spending too much time in front of screens. So I don't want to see kids in kindergarten using any of these things whatsoever. I don't think it's helpful, and I think it's actually kind of harmful for children. And if we're not using them a lot, then I don't see why we need to move toward using them much at all in those early grades. So I would absolutely scrap that whole entire top line. I agree with you and Bob that we should try to get by with a smaller number, always with the option to increase it if we absolutely need to. And I agree with you on the iPad refresh. I think I would not vote for this as is. I think we can amend it tonight if we need to, but I don't know if we have enough time to figure out an amended motion for this.
Yeah, I shared a little email with Bob today, and Bob has shown what I believe to be the case as well. And Dathan, you filled in the other half of it. I think that we are in a perfect world to have a refresh cycle where all of these go away. We have all new devices coming in. If this was at an economic point in time where we can handle it, I would be more than for it. You talk about devices having a certain level of certainty of working. Even if we got new ones, there's no degree of certainty that even the brand new ones are going to work and not fail. So, I mean, there's a certain level of failure. There's less failure with some of the new devices, the Dell devices, than there is the Samsung. But as I said before, I would imagine that The ones that are going to fail have already failed, and the ones that are working probably will work for at least a little while longer. So the concept of a phase in, of spreading this out over time and not doing it as quickly, the rollout, if you will, of doing it in a more measured process just to mitigate some of the expenses. I certainly would like to see what that might look like on a cost basis, on a year-to-year basis, rather than these numbers, which are almost staggering in their year-to-year drain on the resources. I just think that we've got to find a different way. There's got to be a different way to have functioning devices and not spend $700,000 a year on these devices.
Well, the 700,000 a year also includes our current operating annual budget. So it's not the 700 plus.
610, then, if you will.
The 610 is an addition to our
Yes.
fleet. So, and we did the math wrong. It's actually more like 400,000. So,
You know, I guess I'm the resident nerd on the board, and I would agree with everyone that the expansion on line 1 of the iPad program, I never thought that the first year we were going to see this remarkable change because of one-to-one. I thought it was going to take us several years, and so you don't know what you don't know. Teachers need to get used to them. I figured we'd see the payoff in a few years, and I was okay spending money now. I don't think we should expand the program at this point in time. As great as I believe in this, I think we ought to get really good at what we have first. That would be my first statement. I totally understand wanting to smooth out the lumpiness of a 3-year refresh cycle over time, but you're spending money aggressively, but I get that. And usually I see the offset on that being some sort of savings when we want to standardize and get rid of all some Samsungs because there's some really material estimate of what I'm going to save in labor or something along those lines. So I kind of am gravitating towards Bob's model of, can we get by with some that we have? And I probably am a little bit more in favor of the iPad refresh because I do believe you need to refresh technology. Just a thought off the top of my head as I look to your page 3, if I recall correctly, and I know in 14-15, we spent $600,000+ annually on your technology budget. Is that right, Becky? Somewhere around there is what we were spending. Right now you're saying it's $468 plus all this extra one-to-one stuff. I think the forecast models have us at about $600,000 a year. I know we need to refresh stuff. What if we look at a model where we go to 618, 620 of technology spend, which is consistent with what we've done in the past, and gives you a little leeway to replace some of the Samsungs as you best see fit, and we hold off on new initiatives, or iPads, whichever you want to do, and we hold off on new initiatives and kind of just keep the steady state for a year or so our teachers, we can focus maybe less on introducing new devices and more on professional development so that they can leverage what's already existing. So I'm just throwing that on the table of, what if the proposal is, maybe with inflation or something like that, it's 625 or, something around there so that you have some capacity to do some of the replacements, get rid of the real problem children, keep your technology moving, and you know what I mean? So, and we're not handcuffing you too much, but maybe not expanding to the extent that is proposed, and just throwing it out as an idea.
So that being said, I don't know if this necessarily will pass the way it's written.
Sure.
So would you like to come back with a revised proposal, or I'm certainly willing to have anybody restate this?
What's that? You want to come back, or do you need to start spending money now?
May 11th?
Yeah.
Or do you want to?
Well, May 11th.
I know you need to order stuff, so I want to make sure.
Yeah.
If it's May 11th, we have to have a special board meeting because that's a cow.
It's a cow, so we'd have to have a.
We have
It's
to-
okay, I don't care.
Yeah.
Or May 4th.
We can certainly do it on the 4th.
Yeah, we can do it the first part of the board.
Let's do it on the 11th.
So we're back to a special board meeting,
Okay.
which is just 10 more minutes of public comment and. Yeah.
So, just to summarize some of the comments I've been hearing, and if we can come to an amendment tonight, that'd be great. But so what I'm hearing is expansion of the iPads in K2. We ought to hold off.
Yes.
That's fine.
Okay.
as far as the one-to-one and the Samsung replacement, you're saying to look over time and see what that might look like. Assuredly then, what I'd like to propose then is maybe not order 550 right now, but to have, 250 or at least some amount so that we're not caught in the middle of something where now we're having to order because we don't know when these devices are going to be
Bob's
failed.
model saying we know a bunch are going to fail. Estimate what you think will be your average, your mean failure rate, right? And say it's 50%, it's 30%, it's whatever, and then let's replace them now with Dells. And then if you need that because you're finding it's greater than that, then we can act aggressively.
You said 22%, so even if you bumped it up to 25%, I mean, that's a historic number that you can reference.
Even if you bumped it to 50, that'd be 225 devices.
Right, and if that's what you think is best, like I said, but from my perspective, if we kept it more the steady state of what we're spending on technology overall, I'd love to save more where I could, but I get you've got to refresh things.
Yeah.
And to give you some leeway, whether you say, I'd like to replace 40 iPads and 200 Chromebooks or 70 iPads and 100 Chromebooks, that's on the dance floor. I don't need to be there. You decide. But I think if we as a board look at this forecast and see a steady state of the technology spend, I think most of us would be comfortable keeping it not growing astronomically like we did the 1 year. And we know 3 years from now you may have one more little lump because you're smoothing out some old equipment. But right now I don't know if we need to hit that lump right away. I don't know if that's what the rest of you think. I'm just sort of throwing ideas out there.
It's pretty much along what I'm thinking. Yeah.
So if we were to do 250, let's just say 250 devices for Chromebooks to replace at least half of the Samsungs at particular buildings, and that comes to about $75,000. And then we are facing about 600 iPad 2s that we are going to have to refresh. Those were purchased in one big lump sum purchase about 4 or 5 years ago, and now, we're coming to age on those. If we attempt to do the same sort of replacement,
Do they work? Do they work? Are they supported?
This is in anticipation with the new iOS that comes out, and with the new iOS that comes out, there are degradations in hardware performance. I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but if you've upgraded your iPhone and all of a sudden your Wi-Fi card doesn't work, it's because the iOS does not support that particular firmware hardware anymore. So we are going to run into these issues. I would rather not run into these issues with 600 devices at once, because that operationally we can't really function that way.
And that's what I was talking about, smoothing out this introduction, and I think that's what Bob was talking about as well. Instead of 600 in one fell swoop, can you do a third? Can you do 25%? Because they are functioning, they will last a little bit while longer. So can we smooth this big thing out?
And the 118 are for 295 iPads.
Right.
To be refreshed out of the 600 that we do have. So it is going to be piecemeal.
That one's 50%. So, and just doing rough math off the top of my head, if you had a technology budget of about $650,000, you'd be replacing about half your Samsungs and the iPads you think are the third of the 600 iPads you think are a problem, and we'd be roughly in line with what we've spent historically. Is that correct, Becky?
That's correct.
At $650,000. So, I get what you're trying to do. I'm comfortable with it. If I don't know if you need to spend money and you got to get it going fast, talk to us. But if you can wait till May 11th, that's better. I'd rather see a more comprehensive.
Becky, that number, the historical amount that we've spent on technology, was that just devices, or what other items was included in that number?
Well, the annual equipment would be the refresh cycle for computer labs, staff, student.
And what is that specific number?
Well, that would be that 618030.
And that's on a year-to-year basis?
I'd have to look back. I know that's what the 2014-15 year was.
Now, that doesn't incorporate necessarily iPad, but if our challenge is to start to incorporate that, then to land at something like 650, 700,000.
You got a pot of money, you have to figure out how you're gonna use it.
Right, you allocate it as you best see fit for that.
But the 618 is an aberration, though. Wasn't that high for that year?
No, that's
No,
the
no, no,
steady
no.
state. The 800 above it is the aberration.
Exactly.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right, so that's what I'm saying is if we're at, let's say, 650, because you see in the forecast we're getting to 7 something, and Becky, you'll know better than me, but I do remember spending around that money every year when I've approved the budget. It's somewhere in the mid 6s to 7, right around there. So that's what I'm saying. If you had a number roughly in there,
Right.
it would cover half the laptops that we suggested, many of those iPads, all the other stuff you want to do, and we're keeping the forecast and our goal of 2021 in checks at this juncture. And if you come to us and you're like, you know what, another 100 and something of the Samsungs died on us, well, then we know we've got to take action in the future. But I'd rather not do it speculatively.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think the other thing I know MJ had supplied in response to a question I had today is that so we currently have a contingency fleet of Chromebooks. So we have 75 Chromebooks that have never been used, right? Is that
Oh, no. I mean, they have.
Okay, but they're only, this is their first year, right? So we have them, they function?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, I would just think when you're looking at purchasing to replace these Samsungs, so we already have 75 Chromebooks that aren't being utilized by any students as sort of a contingency fleet. So, I mean, I'd trend a little lower, maybe not 250, 225 or something, just to see what our experience is. It would be a suggestion. I mean, if we already have this contingency fleet, and then when we take these, as we're taking some of these Samsungs out, I'm sure as they break or whatever, I don't know if we're able to fix them, because I think you also said we have Samsungs in our loaners basically now is what we're kind of using for students.
Yeah, and that's on a daily basis. So the contingency is really in the fluctuation of enrollment, in the lemon kind of devices where we don't want our students to experience any kind of downtime. And so we swap out those devices. That's the contingency part. So we'd like to keep that for those situations where we're needing to change out a device quickly. The loaners are used on a daily basis, and that's conducted through our LRCs, where if a student were to come in and forgot their Chromebook at home, they can come to the LRC and check one out. These are used on a pretty daily basis. They don't go home. They're really just for those days. Yes, when the charge isn't enough, when they're in the midst of facilitating a repair process or a replacement process and the payment process and all of that. So they're really the stopgap types of devices in the whole system. So in other words, we've had to build an entire infrastructure and an entire system this year, and we've lived through that. So I just wanted to maintain that, we have to start to operationalize this, and if it's landing on a 650 figure, to do with that in mind that we are going to try to replace half of the Samsungs, or at least that ballpark number, and to replace part or half of the 600 iPad 2s, just to keep in line. I mean, we also have about 150 iPad 1s that are still out there. So, I mean, we're talking about a 3-year gradual changeover of those devices as well. So really not trying to do anything really fast, but trying to do things intentionally so that we're building our infrastructure so we could stabilize and know, rest assured, we've got dependable devices out there for our students at any moment when they have in their learning journey. So.
And I think I also just want to note, I mean, I think, I hope you don't take this as, sort of our comments or thoughts here as any criticism. I mean, I think you've done a great job joining the school district in the midst of doing this, a very successful implementation. I hope what you're just hearing from some of us on the board is that we're just trying to look at sort of the stewardship of our resources and maybe just trying to watch that. I think is really what we're trying to do, and we'll learn as we go through this. I guess what how, how this is going to work and, how the devices work and fail and everything.
Yeah, and I mean, I do appreciate that, Bob, and I do recognize that, I mean, this is a full collaboration. We're all trying to steward this as well as help this program to be as successful as it can be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you did inherit a situation where there was just such a huge bolus at one time. Now, how do you string that out? Because ideally, you would like to anywhere between 25 and 33% per year. You would want to, starting in year 3 and year 4. I get the math. I think we all get the math. And all I'm trying to say, and I think some of the other folks here are trying to say, is we have this bolus, but we're going to have to massage this and get extra usability out of these devices to slow down the exchange rate so that we can handle this volume of cash that's going to be required on a yearly basis to flip over 25, 30% of these devices. And that's obvious, but I think all of us, and me especially, when I looked at those original numbers, I was anticipating year 3, year 4, where we would have to start putting monies back in. It's not the case. It's not the case. So I think that's the message, basically.
Sure.
Yeah.
And my message, too, is that I guess I'm kind of that pre-planner, and I wanted to avoid having to come to you in 2019, 2020 saying, this is 4 years from now, and now we've got 60% of our devices that we're going to have to address and kind of have to catch up. So I'm the pre-planner and saying, can we kind of live through and gradually do that over the course and then get to operationalize and come to a consistent expectation about how how our devices are doing and how we're refreshing them. So to that end. Can we make the amendment tonight, or do you really want to come back on the
Well, I think we're going to have to see some hard numbers, accurate hard numbers.
Okay.
The 5th.
Yeah, we could do that.
4th, I mean. I keep saying 5, 4, the 4th.
So, and when you say accurate hard numbers, given our summary tonight, 250 Chromebooks, about 300 iPad 2s. I mean, I can go out and get hard numbers for you to facilitate the process in terms of approving the purchase. Is that the direction?
I think
Approve the amount, and I'm going to come to you with the quotes anyway, but that just allows me to facilitate the process.
The only thing is the numbers that you just mentioned, at least in my mind, you kind of numbers were thrown out, 50%, this and that. There's got to be a way to identify a more concrete number. So if you have, instead of 500 of the Samsungs you want to replace, your anticipated breakdown rate is, even if it's 20, historically it's been 22% for this past year. So if you raise it to, let's say, 35%, you replace 35% instead of 50%. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking at an analysis of the actual numbers instead of, let's just replace half. Why? Can you get by with replacing a third? That's the kind of process that I would like to look at. Is there a better way to determine these failure rates of these devices? And historically, if it's been 22%, why are we replacing 50%?
But we got to expect that number is going to only increase, I would imagine, as they age.
Well, sure. So that's why I said 35.
We have a total of 750 Samsungs, so 550 was only a portion of that as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to set us up so that we're not caught with our pants down and saying, oh my gosh, now we need 200 more devices because they are failing at a different rate. We don't know that, yes, but I'm saying,
you want to be
if we just land on a number and then live with it and then see what it is. I'm comfortable with 250 to know that that's enough to work with. If I've got certain buildings that I could change over right now, then it's a good number to work with, as opposed to trying to piecemeal and saying 30% here and there when we really can't predict that number anyway, and it's going to go up. So,
and I guess I don't know if we're thinking, should we be replacing entire buildings or classrooms, or should we just be more of a, have a stock for each building, whatever, and if something fails, you just hand a kid a new one. I know that, Johnny will have a new one and Susie will have an old one.
I know.
But,
Do you
but
want
I
different
think,
devices?
Yeah, that
Yeah,
becomes real
I mean,
expensive
having-
with labor too, right?
It does,
You might be
having-
coming to us saying, I need more technologists because, I find it in my own industry, a lot of people will say, well, why can't we just replace this one? And when you get to a point where it's like, well, 70% of them are dead, you want to replace them wholesale because otherwise I'm buying a person that comes year over year to me as an expense. So, sometimes use that fine line. I mean, I don't know what the rest of you are comfortable with, but, the rough numbers, and I don't know with estimates of failure rates, we're going to get better than rough numbers. Looked like 650 would get you most of what we talked about at consensus and was in line with historic numbers. So I'm comfortable making that motion, but I don't know if the whole board is comfortable letting you move forward with that and would like, more information. It's up to the board. I don't know what you guys all think.
Well, the easy thing to do is make a motion.
Okay,
well, wait, you're talking about 650 as an annual equipment number?
for this year, she's asking for the technology budget, which as I understood it was a total of $1,078,450, and I'm saying we will give you a 15-16 technology budget of $650,000 and not.
Okay, and then I guess.
700, so that she's got some flexibility.
Well, and I want to ask a question.
We're getting some creep here.
What's included in this annual equipment number? I just wanted to understand that. I mean, is the VoIP in here?
No.
So VoIP is not considered technology equipment then? Telephones?
You approved that at the last board meeting.
understand
And
that.
it's
I'm
funded out of the capital projects fund. This is funded out of the education fund.
Okay.
So I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, this would be your printers that go bad. This would be, I got to replace
All the labs,
5-year-old
all the desktops.
or laptops for teachers. I've got to replace
Smart
servers.
boards,
I got to replace smart
projectors.
boards, projectors. It's everything.
It's all the rest of it.
And annually, there are things to replace and repair.
Right.
So
For
the
me-
one-to-one
so of
technology
your
part was
700,
really just.
Right, if you're estimating that you've got to make sure that you're going to, or 650, whatever it's going to be, that you're going to have enough to do both things.
Exactly.
For me, I like what Scott's saying, you have this amount of money, but for me to vote for it, I need a plan. I need to see, this is how I'm gonna spend the 650, and this is what I'm asking your approval for. So for me, I would have to wait till the 4th or the 11th for you to put that together for me.
But like that annual equipment number, so if it was 600 and some thousand last year and that didn't include the one-to-one technology, so I mean,
But we knew going to the one-to-one, we'd be buying far fewer laptops and desktops because the kids would have them. And
saved
so
about
that number
150.
was coming down to from
Right.
618 to 468, which you
Okay.
see in that table. And that was the idea. You're going to save 20-30% on what you used to buy because of the Chromebooks. And we always envisioned a large percentage of that number would be going towards the refreshing of the Chromebook sort of idea. That was the model a year ago that we had sort of
Same model,
articulated.
same model.
Well, my only thought is, it certainly makes sense, I get it, it's
Yeah.
consistent spending, but we've identified already that the 610 number is high
Right.
by 150, so if the number is 450, why wouldn't we authorize 450?
610 wouldn't be high, that's just.
I think Scott's
what
talking about
currently-
authorizing, say,
Oh, the
everything under the
610 on
annual
the
equipment
one-to-one.
line, and you correct me, you're trying to say entire annual equipment's 650,000, 700,000. So, that includes
Yes.
the Chromebook devices
Right.
as well as any other technology
The
equipment,
whole
the
technology
iPads,
kit.
whatever.
Yes.
Well,
Incorporated in that would be whatever refresh that we're doing, whether it be Chrome, Samsungs or iPads.
well,
It seems that all we have to do is add
That's what I just did,
468,000
Jathan.
to
468.
half of the 178, or half of the 175, which is what we said about the 250, and then we're done. If we've decided that we're not going to do the top line item, and we're going to hold off on the bottom line item, then you just add those two numbers.
we're not going to do the top
Say that
line.
again.
Yeah.
I got it.
The annual equipment amount of 468,200, and then in place of the 610, which is erroneous, we just go for the second line item on the first table, which was 175, so that would be 8750, or 87,500, excuse me. And we're done. what else was there?
Well,
I think she was
the
asking for a
iPad
handful of the
refresh.
iPads too, that
Yeah.
some will die, and so we needed that, and so that's
You
why,
want to do the same thing with the iPads.
something along the lines
That's
of
fine,
that.
then
Yeah.
whatever that is, so that's a pretty hard number.
So your number was approximately 555,000 then?
Without that, the iPad.
Without the
refresh.
Then add the iPads, and that's where I was getting to that 610, 630, so I was like, well, without, shooting the dog, is that gonna be right? Is that, you need a little, we're cutting it at 50%, maybe you need 60, that's why I was just throwing out a rough number. And then I started looking at trending the 618 to the 793 over time in the future, and I'm guessing there's other stuff in there that we're not talking about. So that's where I got to the 650, which is giving her a little cushion in case, but.
And it all works out to about 675K, so.
Including what? The
That-
468?
Your proposal and then the total iPad refresh.
Oh, okay, so the second line item, half of the second line item,
And the
all
whole of
the
the
third.
third.
Yeah, because that's 300 iPads.
Got
That's
it.
about 300
Got it.
iPads. So
I'm okay with that.
675.
So 675, you okay?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I am too. But if others want more, I'm comfortable with waiting. So I know you need to buy things at certain times, so I'm trying to be sensitive to that if you need that. And if you don't need that, then let's wait, a week and get it done.
Yeah, I think, I need a better breakdown so I can understand it. I just need to visualize it.
Well,
See
I'm
what it
okay.
is.
I'm okay with what you're proposing. You two guys.
Well, that's fine,
proposing.
that's three. If there's
Dan or
one
Josh?
more,
I'd like to wait and get more information.
yeah. So I want to wait, Dan wants to wait, Vicky wants to wait. John, what would you like to do?
I would vote for something along Scott's lines. I'd probably be happier at 650 than 675. But, so if somebody presents the motion, I'd vote for it. But if the board decides to wait, I have no problem with that.
MJ, do you need to get going, or can you wait a week?
I would need to get going.
All right. There we go. Let me see if I can do this. I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the 2015-16 annual technology budget, which includes the technology initiative and all the refresh, for a total of $675,000. I think that's it.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any comment? And if there's no board comment, we'll start with Dan.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Nay.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
All right. Next item on the agenda, approval of purchase of laptops for annual staff refresh deployment. It's an action item.
So this is just to facilitate our normal refresh of our staff devices so that we could get a jump on it. Because we have such a short summer, we've lost 2 weeks, and are dealing with the 3,300 Chromebooks to have to pull in and look over and then redistribute to the students. We'd like to get a jump on preparing staff laptops and deploying them by June. So
MT,
hence this bringing forward half of what we normally refresh every year, about 140, 150 devices, and those would go out to staff.
What do we do, MJ, with the old laptops then? I'm just curious. So if we replace 75 of these, what do we do with the 75 that we're replacing?
Well, a lot of them that we are replacing this year are the moving parts hard drives, and those are kind of like perishable goods. So if your hard drive is going to crash, it's because it's older. So many of these devices are between 4 and 5 years, actually. So we're trying to play a little catch up with some staff devices. So we'll look them over, and they will either be refreshed, used for parts, or anything they'll be recycled, used for parts, or any to those degrees.
Okay, and we have some sort of formal recycling program to make sure that all the data is gone off of these things and everything?
Every year.
Okay, okay. And I'll ask an uneducated technology question. So, are laptops are necessary or much more appropriate than, say, like a tablet? I'm just asking for.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Certain pieces of software only run on like an operating system.
Thank you.
And these, the cost of these items is not included in the technology cost that was just previously voted on.
Correct. This is
Completely
being
separate.
funded out of this year's budget, the 2014-15 budget.
This laptop deployment, okay.
And we're
There-
not over in that budget this year in this.
No,
budget.
sir, we're not.
Right.
And then going forward, next year, it'll come out of the same budget area?
Yes.
It should
And
come out of
it-
what we just approved,
To
right?
facilitate, yes, to facilitate.
The annual purchase?
The
In future, yes.
675 next year, these laptops would come out of that 675 we just agreed to for the next year.
Exactly.
Got it. Right, the reason you need that 675 now is because you will order things and the bill will come around July 3rd, and you don't want to sign a contract and order them, but we know it'll come out of next year's
Correct.
checkbook.
Right.
Got it.
So if the next round of so these laptops won't last one more year?
No, they will not.
Trying to stretch it.
No, I understand. I try to stretch it too, actually. So, we're always trying to find ways to redeploy and repurpose things. Always.
Okay, well, if somebody wants to make a motion,
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the purchase of 75 Mac Airs per attached quote in the amount of $74,025 to facilitate the refresh of staff laptops. This is funded from the 2014-15 budget.
second?
Second.
Okay, why don't we start with Bob this time?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
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 John?
Aye.
Okay. Becky, approval to lease, purchase, and maintenance vehicles.
Our district vehicles are old and require annual maintenance that you're just putting good dollars after bad. So we've tried several times to bid our vehicles in the last year. Last fall we did it and nobody bid on the vehicles that we spec'd. So we had one vehicle that needed to be replaced immediately. We went to the state bid and replaced that pickup truck, plow truck. The board approved it in December and we received it just a couple of weeks ago, to be honest with you. So we've continued, and we said in November when we got no bids back that we would be back to the board sometime this year with another proposal, and that's what this is tonight. We put a bid spec together defining vehicles that were more appropriate for our use, then going with a state bid spec, and we received 2 bids from Rochford in
El Pimani.
and El Pimani. Yeah, I'm trying to think of where Rochford is. And Rochford, with the trade-in values, became the low bid. There is a $15,000 financing cost to finance them over a 5-year period, but frankly, that $3,000 a year is far less than we're paying in maintenance currently on the vehicles that we have. So we are recommending that we replace the district vehicles, maintenance vehicles, over a 5-year leasing period to Rushford. And again, the vehicles we have are, and I don't like to use this word loosely, but when you look at the safety of the people driving those vehicles around the community, you want your staff to be in safe vehicles. So, and that's the reason for this recommendation.
I have 2 questions. Is the amount of, notwithstanding an 18-year-old vehicle, but is the amount of money spent in repairs on a quarterly basis more than the $7,000 that this is going to cost on a quarterly basis?
No, not on a quarterly basis.
Okay. And you also have the age of the vehicles beginning at 6 years, going up to 18 years. I understand that the likelihood of failure on an 18-year-old vehicle, particularly one that's used for snow and everything else, is ostensibly higher than a 6-year-old vehicle. But what's wrong with a 6-year-old vehicle?
When we looked at our fleet, we looked at, we've purchased in the 6 years I've been here, 3 new vehicles. A box truck for delivery purposes, a cargo utility van for the use of the painter and small deliveries around the district, and 2 pickup trucks in the last 2 years. We determined between the maintenance staff, Mr. Mackel, Brian Imhoff, and myself, that we would replace the fleet that was greater than 6 years old, just so that we had some continuity in the age of our fleet, and that we would be looking at, that we could actually go into a program at the end of 5 years, replacing maybe 1 or 2 vehicles a year instead of having to replace the entire fleet at once. And the trade-in value of $60,675 truly is reflective of that age of that fleet. We were amazed at the trade-in value that Rochefort was giving us.
Any other comments?
Does it matter to you whether we lease or just buy them outright?
Not really. From a cash flow standpoint, we felt, both Mr. Imhoff and myself felt it was better to spread the payment out over 5 years, but it makes absolutely no difference to me whether we buy them outright or we.
Okay. I mean, 15,000 is
15,000, absolutely. In my effort to protect cash flow.
For what it's worth, I would recommend going with the outright purchase because the payback period for the lease finance is short enough that I'm not sure financing it really does anything for our ability to meet our long-term goals.
Right.
I'm sure Rochefort would appreciate the cash purchase versus the financing.
All right, any other comments?
Yeah, I'm encountering the same situation we encountered with the roof a couple months ago, where we only have 2 bids on the paper here. I realize you put it out to 9 people, but at the end of the day, these are 4 trucks. And for me to vote on things, and I realize, I'm a short timer, and it doesn't really, you're not going to put up with me much longer, but for me to vote on something like this when we're going to spend this amount of money, I need to see 3 quotes. I wouldn't buy a car myself without 3 quotes. I wouldn't put a roof on my house without 3 quotes. So I'm going to vote no, and that's the reason.
Frankly, I'd like to see more data on the ones that you're going to get rid of. If I was to stagger the fleet so that every 2 or 3 years you get rid of 2 vehicles and kind of make it a consistent thing as a maintenance plan going forward, I think you'd want to get rid of the top end ones now and keep your 6, 7, and 8-year-old vehicles another 2 or 3 years until they get to be 10 years, and then cycle those out. I think that would give you a better flow down the pipeline, if you will. So I'll be voting no, because I think that the swap out can be handled differently for the future.
The trade-in value for those older vehicles is
It's lower.
Yeah,
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
The majority of the trade-in value is for those newer vehicles, and truly it's reducing our total cost to be able to replace all the vehicles at this point in time. And our costs will only go up if we don't trade all of them in at this point in time.
So Becky, did you say that, so 5 new vehicles, did you say that, I guess do we have, besides the vehicle we just purchased, do we have any vehicles that are newer than these?
We purchased a new one last year, so 1 this year, 1 the prior year, and a box van and a utility cargo van.
Okay.
In the 6 years that I've been.
So is it sort of the opinion that these 5 vehicles aren't safe or aren't reliable?
We drive them every day. The older models obviously have a higher maintenance cost than the newer models do. But the 1997 truck, that's that one's a little rough right now. That's the truck that our plumber uses. And what we're going to do with that is kind of get away from that pickup truck because he's in the back digging through things. So we're going to put him into a transit van, and then we'll have shelving in there so that he can organize his parts and make him more efficient on the job. So we're going to do that with 2 of the vehicles.
And I guess I would add, before I fall out of this chair, that the vehicles are more designed to meet the needs of the particular maintenance person. So the painter, the plumber.
Yeah, and then the one that we just bought was for Vince, and he's kind of our carpenter locksmith, and we put a box bed on that has the toolboxes on the back of the truck, so he can access his parts, all around the end of the box, and it still has a 4x8 foot bed for a sheet of plywood in it. So that'll make him a lot more efficient because he's just like doing the rest. He's pulling stuff out of boxes out of the back of a truck. Not an efficient way to run a maintenance department. So those are some of the upgrades that we're doing on the older model trucks.
Any further comments, John?
Not for me, no.
Okay. Any other comments from the board?
So is the motion to buy them outright, or do you want to finance them for those who are interested in doing this? I mean, I'm okay with buying them outright too, because I don't think the financing is, other than optics and cash flow, it's not going to change anything in the long-term thing. So I just assume save the money if I could.
So the purchase price would be then the $128,750.15.
So if somebody wants to make a motion utilizing that figure.
Sure. I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, award the bid for the purchase of maintenance vehicles to Rush Ford for a total price of $128,750.15.
Is there a second?
Source for this purchase is the Operation and Maintenance Fund.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Why don't we start on Dan's side?
Nay.
Nay.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Next item, consent agenda.
Thank you.
Dr. Heinz.
Let's see, are you doing it or am I doing it?
I can do it. There's nothing included in the consent agenda other than what is normally included. And is there any discussion on any of the items contained in the consent agenda by the board?
I guess I just had one question. So I know we use Hodges, Louisi, and I saw in here there's a Seyfarth, and if I'm pronouncing it right, and Shaw. What is that
There are
legal firm used for?
one of our attorneys that oversees some of our special education cases.
Okay.
They're working with Mrs. Boyd on one of our due process situations.
Will we be coning down to utilizing one firm for our legal needs, or will we still continue to use 2, possibly 3? What do you think?
I think Jane and I have had some conversations about this. I think we would like to potentially collapse maybe down to 2, but we need to.
Can we negotiate better rates by doing that?
Not usually, no. They each have their own fee structure.
You know, for what it's worth, I've been thinking about the legal services for a little bit of time. It's probably worth the board knowing that the first year I was on the board, so 2007-08, the board did an RFP and ultimately a beauty contest to relook at its legal counsel. Up until then, it had been using only Seyfarth Shaw, and it had been using Seyfarth for a large number of years, maybe 20 years, something like that. As a result of doing that RFP, we brought in both Hodges, Louisi, and Francis, and we kept Seyfarth, but for a more limited role. In doing that, we got lower hourly rates from both Hodges and Francis as compared to Seyfarth, and we had the flexibility to use the different firms for different purposes. So my recollection at the time was that we were using Francis primarily for bonds and finance and property tax related things. We were using Seyfarth primarily for special education related things. and we were using Hodges for most everything else. Dr. Pryor, who was superintendent at the time, liked having the three because she could kind of pick and choose where the best strength was for any given issue. I don't really have an opinion as to whether we ought to go forward with 3 or 2 or 1, but we're now getting to the point where it's been about 8 years since we did an RFP for legal services. I'm not sure I would run right out and do another RFP and beauty contest in the next year, but for those of you who will be on the board a few more years, you may want to think about doing that, in maybe 2-3 years. At that point, you'll be at about 10 years since the last time it was done.
John, I'm intrigued by what you mentioned, that by going to 3 separate firms, we actually negotiated lower rates. I would have thought that if you combine all of your needs with one firm, they would give you preferred hourly rates. Which way do you think that ultimately we're going to be going?
Well, I think the reason we got lower hourly rates was just simply because the 2 new firms we brought in had offered lower rates than the incumbent firm. I don't think any of it was volume discounting.
Oh.
You might get volume discounting if you promised everything to one firm. I guess I question whether we really do the volume. That would mean a whole lot to any of the firms that we currently do business with. Many of which do business with many school districts.
Right. I guess the only way to know is to send out a request for bids, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? If not, somebody make a motion.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge, Niles, Illinois, approve the consent agenda of April 27, 2015, which includes the personnel report, bills, payroll, and benefits, approval of financial update for the period ending March 31st, 2015, and destruction of audio closed minutes. None.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Is it Bob? Okay, Bob.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Okay. Approval of minutes. Any questions, concerns, or corrections for any of the minutes? And if everybody was okay with the reading of the minutes, how about a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge, Niles, Illinois, approve the minutes from the regular board meeting on March 23rd, 2015, the special board meetings on March 25th and April 13th, 2015, and closed session minutes on March 23rd and April 13th, 2015.
Is there a second?
Second.
Starting with Dan?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Okay. Dr. Heinz, board member liaison report.
Bob, do you want us to take the lead on ELF? We attended together, and
If you have something else to do first, I can pull out a sheet of paper if I know where to put it.
the medical advisory meeting that we had on April 22nd, I was unable to attend, so I do not have notes to share. Bernadette, were you at that meeting? Jane, would you mind coming up? I don't have notes. Thank you.
This is a group that meets twice a year, and the nurses in the district collaborate with physicians in the area. So a lot of the conversations are about best practices, how to handle EpiPens and stocking EpiPens, requirements for immunizations. This particular committee meeting was pretty routine, pretty brief. Do you have any questions?
No.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you want to do anything with ELF?
Sure, the ELF meeting, which was on April 15th, they reviewed, they've got about $35,000 that they are looking to have available for grants. Your grants are, supposed to come from this District 64 staff. They had some parents suggest something and they don't honor those. They're continuing to get ready with the Judith Snow Award, which goes to 8th graders who can self-nominate themselves electronically. They're planning to participate in the Got to Run, which is May 16th in the morning, and the proceeds from that go to the ELF Foundation for District 64. All somebody has to do is say that they are there for District 64. They're continuing to look to recruit members. They're having a Potbelly fundraiser April 29th, so I guess that'd be in 2 days, from 5 to 8 p.m., and the ELF gets a percentage of the money that's raised if a certain number of folks.
They give us 25% of the total ring for the day, so it's a nice fundraiser.
Right. Yeah. Other than that, they talked about some grants, I think, for the Roosevelt LRC that they approved, as well as a Carpenter Move and Learn initiative, which is about $21,000. So that's really, I think, a quick summary of the meeting.
Okay, it's a good meeting.
And Lori and I were both in attendance.
Yes.
Other items?
So the next meeting is just a few short days away, Monday, May 4th. It's a special meeting. We agreed earlier today we will start at 5:45 in terms of closed, and then we will 6, and then we will go to begin the next meeting at 7:30 when we go from closed to open. You can see that agenda for the special, and then you have an agenda also for the reorg meeting. We will be honoring in between our departing members and welcoming our new members. So, and family members of both the Collins family and the Heidi family have RSVP'd that they're going to come to celebrate. There's a FOIA request in here for you to take a look at. There's an MOI in terms of the collection and fees. We've cut that number in half from $41,672 to $18,925. You have in here minutes from traffic safety. It was probably the fastest meeting in history. It took us 18 minutes from top to bottom. Right, the fastest meeting, traffic safety. Really not much to discuss other than Jefferson continues to be just a real trouble spot in terms of the back area with drop-off and pickup, because there's just so many cars between Emerson and Jefferson. So we're trying to see if the Niles police can get involved and kind of help, because you've got folks that are in a hurry and they're making some dangerous choices to try to save a couple seconds. And that was really it for that. Strategic planning, we had a preview session. We had around, as my memo said, 25 or so community members come for the 2 different sessions. We then had another strategic planning meeting where we looked at the 6 big categories, and we're really working to flesh out what those areas might look like. We have subgroups that will be working to put some strategies, outcomes, and measures together, and we are on target to bring the strategic plan to you in June for approval. John, did you want to add anything in terms of strategic planning? You were a table mate.
Nope, you summarized it well.
Okay. We did have a very successful bike helmet event. We had doorbusters right away at 4, and we got right in that door, and we sold over 275 helmets, and there's a nice little picture and some publicity in the newsletter that went out today. Residency re-verification is into week 2, and we're tracking numbers, but we're over 10% in terms of families that have already registered. We've had a couple glitches in terms of paperwork to bring, and then they have to come to the district office. A few folks that are, unhappy that we're making them turn in their fees earlier than usual. That June 1st deadline is hitting a few people. One that I've heard from at the least, and she's concerned that it's so much earlier. And we've said, reach out to Brian and/or Becky, and we'll try to work with you if we can. So we're kind of case by case if something comes up, trying to help move the process along. We're going to be in round 2 of interviews for the Jefferson principal. We have a couple nice finalists. We had a large showing of interest for the AP position that we have open, and we will be doing screening interviews now and trying to get that process moved forward. We would like to bring all of these candidates to you in May so we can kind of lock down all of our hires and hopefully have some time to do a little bit of transition with some of our new folks before we end the school year. We had a great Arbor Day the other day. I was over at Washington and we planted a tree in the village of Park Ridge. The forestry department did a very nice job reading the proclamations and talking to the little ones about the importance of Arbor Day and that fact that Park Ridge is a Tree City recipient and why it's so important to care for trees. And then Carrie talked about the chili cook-off. We have a $500 gift card that was been donated to the Educational Learning Foundation, so we'll put that to good use. And that is it.
I have one question. When is Dr. Lopez going to provide us an update on educational ends, which I think goes hand in hand with, say, strategic plan development?
So we moved that off of this meeting agenda, and thank goodness we did. It's already 11. We set a new date at when? Do you remember, Dr. Lopez? Your committee's working in May.
Early August. Tell me how that is going to work. If your committee formulation won't have any, will they have conclusions or what do you what is your goal with your committee? Because it would seem to me that you'd want that information and data incorporated into the strategic plan.
They're actually not working on collecting data related to the assessments. They're working on revising the assessments. So our educational ends assessments, some of them are no longer aligned to our new curriculum. So they're working on revising those assessments. So next year we'll be piloting those, but we wanted to bring that whole assessment package to the board to show you what those revisions look like and really also to show you what is rigorous about a local assessment, right?
All right, so it's a little different than what I was thinking. You're reordering your assessments of the ends, not the ends themselves.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, that's a big difference. All righty, any other comments or questions? And if not, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any disagree? None?
No, that's
All right, we'll see everybody on the 4th. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks for calling in.
Hi,